Good evening, everyone. It is time for Vampire Book Club. Come one, come all to discuss vampire books with me. I am tweeting. I posted on Patreon, posted on Discord. If you didn't get the message, sorry, you're watching this later, but for those of you who are here right now, thank you for joining me. Let's see, how many do we have? Nice. Hello, welcome. Thank you for coming. I know this month's Vampire Book Club was a pretty popular book that a lot of people had read before, so even if you didn't read the book with us for the club, maybe you've read it before and we can discuss it further, or you can just hear what it's all about. What am I drinking? Nothing yet. My glass is empty because my ice cube, I couldn't get out of the ice cube mold. Needed to unfreeze a little bit. It's a skull-shaped ice cube mold, because of course it is. Aha! It's coming. Yes. Come on, ice cube. This is the most suspenseful part. There. Skull-shaped ice cube. For my drink. Sorry, that was loud. We are drinking Captain Morgan's Private Stock, which is my favorite spiced rum. I drink it straight on ice. Not neat, but straight. Don't mix it with anything. It's too good for mixing. If I want to mix spiced rum with something, I buy the regular Captain Morgan's or Kraken. I like that one too. I don't like that one straight as much, but the Private Stock is good straight. So cheers! If you have never been to Vampire Book Club before, this is a club where we read one vampire book a month together. We discuss it on Discord throughout the month, and then we come on live on YouTube to discuss it at the end of the month. Usually I will summarize the book a bit for you, talk about my thoughts and feelings along the way, and then answer all of your questions. So if you have questions for me about the book, you can put them in the chat now or save them for later. Don't ask me questions about other things yet. You'll have plenty of time to do that later. We just start with the book. And this month, we read Halfway to the Grave by Jeaniene Frost, which is book number 1 in the urban fantasy series, the Night Huntress series, which I thought after reading it, it was going to be called the Red Reaper series, because that's what she calls herself. She doesn't call herself the Night Huntress, but it's a long series, so maybe that comes up in later books. We'll see. All right. Yeah, a gin and tonic would have been best for this book, but two reasons why I didn't do a gin and tonic. One, I don't have any tonic, which is sad. Diet tonic water is one of my favorite drinks, even without gin. I just drink it plain. Number 2, gin is gross. I don't like gin. There's some mixed cocktails with gin that I do like, but they have to be like really mixed cocktails. Just straight gin and tonic, no thank you. I would do vodka tonic, happily. What else can you do with tonic? But I didn't have any tonic water. So I figured doing the straight liquor would go with what the character had out of the flask a couple times. Usually it was whiskey, I think. But I like rum best, so that's what I'm having. Yeah, Paul is a gin fan. We do have much gin in the house. I could be drinking it, but I'm not the gin fan in the family. All right. Looking good. If you are not a member of the Vampire Book Club but want to be, first step is to join my Discord. The link is in the description of this video, is in the description of all my videos. Join my Discord for like regular vampire reasons, but also to join the book club if you so desire. You can participate in book club without reading the book. Lots of people do that. We discuss the book as we're reading it along the way in the Discord server. You have to select the book icon when you join from the bot channel, and then that will get you access to the book club. Otherwise, it's a private section of the server. But it is free. Everyone is welcome to join. It's private, but it's not exclusive. So, Halfway to the Grave. The first book about a half vampire named Catherine. She goes by Cat. She's not very feline. She's a half vampire who is 22 years old, and she has been hunting vampires since she was 16 years old for two reasons. First of all, the reason she's a half vampire is because a vampire sexually assaulted her mother, and then her mother got pregnant with that vampire's child, and then she was born. And her mother thinks all vampires are evil because, they attacked her, and she didn't even know vampires existed before that. This is not a society where people know vampires exist, even though vampires are, what would they say, 1 in 5 people are a vampire? Like, there's lots of vampires in the world, or was it 5%? Either way, lots of vampires in the world. But most people don't know they exist. This isn't the kind of urban fantasy where vampires live among us and everyone knows. It's where they live in shadow, secret society. It's very mafia style. And she knows about it because her mother told her, but all she knows is that vampires are evil. They attacked her mom. Then she was born. So now that, as soon as she got to be 16, she started hunting them and killing vampires. And the reason she started then is because she had a really bad date. Well, she had a date she thought was good with this guy, just a random guy. And then after they slept together, she came to the bar to see him again, and he ignored her because, he got what he wanted and he was done with her. So she was really mad that night, and she happened to see a vampire in the bar. So she seduced that vampire out of the bar and had him drive out on the road, and then she killed him on the side of the road, buried him in a ditch, and she's been doing that ever since. By the time we are with her, when she's 22, she says she's killed 16 vampires, which is honestly a lot fewer than I was expecting. She goes to the clubs in her town, which is Ohio something, not Cincinnati, but another place in Ohio. Every single night she goes to these clubs, and there's a lot of clubs in town, like dozens and dozens of nightclubs in town and bars. And she goes there waiting for a vampire to show up, planning to seduce the vampire to get him to take her away so that then she can kill him in the same pattern. But the way she seduces them is just by existing. Like, she's not especially seductive. She's pretty, and she has like bright red hair, which of course is awesome, but she's not very worldly. Her only experience with men was with that guy who did her dirty, and she has always been a loner. She's never had friends because she's different, and she has an inner monster that her mother is always warning her about. So she's never had friends. She's never had anyone give her like, this is how to be attractive lessons. She's aggressively straight. She only seems to be killing male vampires, and for most of the book I thought only male vampires existed because we only met males. She only stalked males, she only killed males, though we do see 2 female vampires later in the series, and she never mentions at that point anything about that being different or special to her. So I think she's just aware that there are as many female vampires as male, but they just aren't the ones she's been killing. I guess female vampires don't go stalking in nightclubs for pretty redheads. Columbus, Cincinnati, Cleveland, Toledo, Macon, and Canton are the big cities in Ohio. See, if they said what city she's in, I've forgotten, which is strange for me. So I think they probably didn't say it, and maybe it's just supposed to be a made-up city. So, cut to 22 years old. She's got 16 murdered vampires under her belt. She has a system. She always kills them. She learned by accident that the way to kill a vampire is not with a wooden stake through their heart, but with a silver stake through their heart. Any other weapon won't permanently kill them. The heart can only be destroyed by a silver stake. Like, even if you cut off their head, they won't really die. It needs to be a silver stake through the heart. And as soon as you kill a vampire, the vampire's body changes back to its true age. So if the vampire had only been a vampire for 20 years, then it will only look 20 years older as a corpse than it did as a vampire. If a vampire's been a vampire for 200 years, then it'll just dissolve basically into a skeleton. And I thought that was a pretty cool vampire detail. You've seen it before, but not very often, so I like that in this. So, 22 years old, she's doing her thing, she kills a vampire. The book opens with her driving with a vampire's body in the trunk that she's killed, and she gets pulled over because one of her taillights out, and she's very paranoid that the policeman will look in the trunk and see the dead vampire, but no, she gets away. It's a very hooky beginning. The beginning has a great hook to it. But then she immediately goes back out the next night to hunt for another vampire because she's like feeling lucky. So she's at the bar. Apparently she goes clubbing in baggy jeans and just regular shirts. So like I said, she's not actively trying to seduce them just by being a young, pretty woman. It's enough for vampires, apparently. She sort of has like a glow to her that draws vampires to her as opposed to any of the other pretty girls in the clubs, and that's because she's a half vampire. Even though she doesn't fully understand what that means, she knows it makes her stronger, faster, tougher, can see better in the dark than most normal humans. Definitely not to the level of any vampire's powers, but she's got some of the powers. And she usually manages to kill them with the element of surprise. She has her silver stake coated in wood, so the vampires will see the wooden stake and be like, haha, that can't hurt me. And then she'll be like, surprise, bitch, because it has silver inside, and then she stabs their heart. So the next night, she goes back to the bar, or to a different bar, and she's looking for vampires, and then she finally sees one come in, and he's this very sexy, tall, chiseled, bleached blonde vampire with like the sharpest cheekbones in the world. And she goes up to him and she's trying to get him to come away with her, but he is very single-mindedly focused on waiting for someone at that bar. He wants to meet someone, so he sends her away. He tries to use his like vampire powers to send her away because they can hypnotize people, but the hypnosis doesn't work on her because she's a half vampire, but she doesn't even know that's a power yet, so she doesn't even know she's avoiding it. So she is kind of confused why this guy's not going for her ruse, because usually vampires come to bars to pick up chicks, and he seems to be wanting to do something else there. So she goes all the way to say, wanna fuck? And this is like so scandalous for her, and we find out that she's this very pure, innocent little Christian girl who doesn't use bad language and who like doesn't like seeing parts of people's bodies like, oh, ankles, like that kind of girl, which is very contradictory with her whole vampire slaying persona. And we find out that she comes from a very religious family. Her mother is super religious, and her grandparents that she lives with. And so the fact that this comes out of her mouth and that she says it shocks even her, but the guy is like, maybe later. So she's like, okay, fine. So she leaves, and then she's kind of hanging around, and then another vampire comes in the bar. She's like, okay, great. And so she lures that one in, and she gets him to take her out, and drives him away, does the whole thing, kills him. We get to see her in action. She buries his body, cuts off the head, buries his body. And she's feeling so good about this that she decides to go back to the club again. And then she sees that vampire again, the one with the bleached hair, who's definitely not Spike from Buffy the Vampire Slayer. I swear he's not, even though he has a very British accent. We find out later that he's Australian, so all the slang words he's using that sound very Cockney apparently aren't spoken in that type of accent. He just has a regular English accent, but he uses those kind of slang words from his Australian time. He was born and raised in England, but then got sent off to a penal colony in Australia for doing crimes, and that's where he became a vampire. So he lived there a lot longer than he ever lived in England. Sorry, you're cracking me up in the chat. So he's like, hey, I'm ready to take you up on that offer and out. And she's like, oh, okay. So she does her thing. She goes out to the parking lot. She's like, let's drive in your car, because she needs to have the vampire be the one driving, so that way when they pull over, supposedly to like get frisky in the car on the side of the road, that's when she can surprise him and stake him in the heart. But he says he only has a motorcycle, so they have to take her car. She's like, oh crap, I can't do it in my car. And so she's like, oh, I'm drunk, could you drive my car? And he's like, nope, you drive. And she's like, oh crap, this is going badly. And so she gets in the car and she starts driving, and they're doing the thing, same old pattern that she usually does. She pulls off to the side of the road and is like, this is a good spot to get frisky. She's like, let's go outside and we'll go like lay down in the woods and do it. And he's like, no, I like doing it in the car. So like every one of her plans is being foiled. So she's like kind of trying to get to her silver stake without him seeing it, even though he's on the wrong side from her staking hand. And it's hard to like maneuver because they're in the car and she doesn't want to get blood all over her car, but she still got to kill this guy, otherwise he's going to kill her, right? Because he's a vampire. And we know that the reason he brought her out to the woods was because he was going to kill her, right? Because all vampires are evil murderers and they always kill their victims. We find out later this is not true. Many vampires just drink from victims without killing them. It is only the particularly bad vampires that do kill their victims. But most vampires just drink from the victim a couple pints of blood and then hypnotize them into forgetting what happened to them, and they both go on their merry ways. So we don't know whether this vampire is one of those types or the one that's going to kill her, but she sure thinks he's the one that's going to kill her. So while she's trying to get her stake and maneuver, he gets in a hit and he knocks her out, punches her. And then he abducts her. He takes her to his cave lair. And it's literally a cave, but apparently it's like a really like swag cave that he inherited from a Native American tribe that had been wiped out by white people in oldie times. And he promised he'd look after their sacred cave for them, so that's why he lives there. But he's like got it all set up with electricity and cable, and he's got rooms and furniture because there's like he's a vampire, so he can pick up like big boulders and move them to be doors to be secure. We also know, when we find out later, that vampires can go out in the sun. It hurts them, like they get a really bad sunburn really quickly, but they don't burst into flame or anything, so they can go out in the sun, but it's just like, you know, you burn in 2 minutes. So she wakes up in this cave, she's tied up, he's taken off her clothes, because, she had started undressing to pretend like they were going to do stuff in the car. So he's taken off all her clothes and she's just in her bra and underwear and she's all tied up, and he thinks that she's working for one of the bad vampires. So he starts trying to interrogate her and get her to tell him who she's working for, because he thinks that one of the like bad vampires out there has her be like an assassin for him to kill off good vampires. But she doesn't work for anyone, so she keeps trying to tell him that she only works for herself, that she's a vampire slayer, and he just doesn't believe her, and so he's getting to the point where he's just going to kill her because she's not giving the information, but she eventually talks him into agreeing to fight. She's like, okay, let you and me fight, and if I win, I go free. If I lose, whatever. So during this, he finds out, he sees her eyes glowing, which is a vampire trait. So he's like, wait, you're alive, you have a pulse, you have a heartbeat, you're breathing, but your eyes are glowing. So she tells him that she's half vampire and all that. And he's like, oh, you'd be perfect for me to use in my plan as bait for me trying to catch another bad vampire. And she's like, no way, I'm not going to do that. And he's like, no, it's perfect. So she's like, okay, I'm going to fight you for it. If I lose the fight, you can use me as bait and I'll work for you. If you use the fight, you'll be dead, so I get out of here. So she fights with him, and of course she loses because she finds out that all the vampires she's been fighting before and killing were all very young vampires. They'd only been vampires for, 10 years or 20 years. But he's been a vampire for 240 years or something, and so he's a master vampire, which means he's super powerful, and he can move in a way she's never seen before. He can, blur and, jump high, and he just completely overwhelms her. He kicks her ass. He punches her. Sorry. YouTube is like, do you want to put it in an ad now? Now's a good time to put in ads. No, YouTube. We are talking about vampires. No ads. Yeah, I was surprised, too, that Master Vampire only has to be 240 years old. But apparently once you get to that age, you got, way more superpowers. He calls himself a master. You find out later that master vampire is the word used for vampires that make other vampires, which are all bound to the master, and I don't know that he's made any, so he might just be saying that he's like a super cool vampire. But yeah, he's not even that old in my understanding of vampire terms. But in terms of this book, she's like, oh my god, you're the oldest vampire I've ever met. How is that even possible? So it really blows her mind. And he's like, you've killed only baby vampires. You have no chance against me. But she doesn't believe it. And then she finds out he's right. So he fights and fights and fights. And he just beats the shit out of her. And she passes out again. And then she wakes up later in his bed She's healed. She doesn't know how, but she's never been in bed with a man before, except that one time, which didn't go very well. So she freaks out in her little, like, innocent girl situation, and she's like, what am I doing in your bed? And he's like, it's daytime, we're gonna sleep now. She's like, no, let me go. And he's like, no, you could sleep in my bed, or you could sleep on the floor, but you're hogging the covers anyway. Give me my comforter back. This becomes like a running thing. So she decides to sleep on the floor because no way she's gonna get in bed with a vampire. And we find out later that he gave her a few drops of his blood, and that's how he healed her. So when they do wake up later, they finally talk, and she's like, okay, I guess I have to work for you now. What do you need me to do? And he's like, I need you to be bait, but I also need you to be better fighter, because the vampires I'm hunting aren't the babies that you're hunting. And we find out later that he was hunting the same guy she killed that night. But he wanted to interrogate that guy first, and she killed the guy before he could interrogate it. So even though he was glad that guy died, he needed that information. He's like, okay, so I need to find another vampire to get the information I need. One of the flunkies of this main bad guy, you know, a mini boss, to get him to give me information to go after the main bad guy. And she's like, who are these people and why are they bad? And he's like, need to know basis. I'm not telling you. I'm just going to train you in a training montage of 5 weeks of him, like, giving her, like, Rambo, Buffy the Vampire Slayer, Hercules training. And she can, like, run 40 miles in 3 hours, and she gets, like, really strong, and her punches are really good. And he finds out that she's naturally really good at throwing knives. She can throw knives and, like, almost have perfect aim. So he trains her so she gets perfect aim. And then once she's all done training, has completely kicked her ass, gone through vampire boot camp. She's apparently been coming there every night for the past 5 weeks, even though she goes home to her mom and her grandparents during the day, to do her training. At the end of the training, he's like, okay, second step in this phase is making you bait. And she's like, I've always been bait. That's worked for me. And he's like, no, honey, not with those pants, not with that shirt, not with that hair. So he takes her to a salon, and the salon gives her, like, a complete makeover, which includes, like, waxing and stuff. So why is that necessary? And then she, after 5 hours in the salon, she comes home, and he's bought her all these, like, super slutty, skanky dresses, which I guess is kind of like what the cover model is wearing. Though the way they're described, they're even skankier than this. She's like, oh, these dresses show my cleavage, and they're only they're 4 inches above my knee. That's so short and scandalous. And he's like, yeah, you're gonna look like a hooker, but like a high-class hooker, really, like, fancy hooker, as to be bait. And so he makes her, like, train in learning how to put on makeup and dressing in these really slutty clothes. So she dolls herself all up. She does it. She does her hair. She curlers, hot rollers and everything, because I guess having hot rolled curled hair is sexier than... This book is from 2007. It does feel very 90s, doesn't it? Yeah. But 2007. The author feels kind of stuck in the 90s because she uses some terms for technology that I'm like, we weren't using those anymore in 2007. Like, if I remember some, I'll tell you. I do know that he gets directions from MapQuest instead of Google Maps, which I think might still be accurate for 2007, but MapQuest was what I used in, like, 1999. And, you know, other things like that where technology, she's like, oh, this is new and surprising. Book of, like, yore. So he's looking at her, and he's like, okay, you look really hot and sexy, but something's missing. Oh, I know. Go commando. Take off your underwear. And she's like, what? No. And he's like, vampires have a really heightened sense of smell. If they smell you, they'll understand that you're not wearing underwear because they can smell whether you have underwear on or not. And the smell will be the extra step we need to catch this guy, this particular guy. And she's like, no, never. And he's like, no choice. So he forces her to do it. Hold up. Yeah. Well, he has a smartphone too, because he can, like, Google stuff on his phone. They don't use the word Google, but he can look up stuff on his phone. And I remember getting my first smartphone in, like, 2009. So that does seem kind of, like, early for that. Yeah, they can smell if you have underwear on or not. So the day comes where they're going to go to a club, to catch this guy that he's been hunting. And she's not wearing any underwear. And she goes in, and it works exactly as they want. The guy's there. She does a thing where he lures him out. They go on the side of the road. The reason he can't go after this guy himself is because if he's too close to this guy, the guy will sense that another vampire is near. That's why he needs someone this guy can't sense, so that she can distract him, and then he can get close and kill the guy. So because this guy is much more powerful than anyone's faced before, even though she's going through the same old usual routine, and she's like, oh, let's go off to the side of the road and have sex in the woods. He's much harder to get a hold of. She fights him, but she's losing. So then the vampire, I haven't told you the vampire's name, the not Spike vampire. His name is Bones. And he comes up and he saves her in time, and they get the guy, and they're trying to interrogate him to get some more information about the other guy he's looking for. And then he tells the guy, if you give me this information, I promise I won't kill you. And the guy's like, okay, he gives the information. And then he's like, okay, Cat, you can kill him. And the guy's like, no. Yeah, his name is Bones. His real name is Crispin, which is such a 2000 name, but he doesn't use Crispin. He uses Bones. Yeah, he does have the most up-to-date technology. They all have plasma TVs, right? Remember when plasma TVs, or at least when we called them that? That was a special thing. So they kill the guy. He's like, job well done. Okay, next thing I need to know, another day, another time, is I need you to go to this graveyard and talk to a ghost and ask this ghost for information about any young women who have been murdered lately in the area. And she's like, what? Ghosts are real? And so she finds out ghosts are real. And she can see ghosts. Humans can't see ghosts. Vampires can see ghosts. But because she's half vampire, she can see ghosts. So he takes her to the cemetery. And I think she's still wearing her, like, slutty clothes. So they go to the cemetery, and he's like, okay, this guy died in oldie times because he was an illegal moonshiner. So take this bottle of moonshine out there, and you can use this to, like, lure him. So she goes out, she finds the ghost, and the ghost is, like, a real jerk. And she's trying to get the information from the ghost. And then she shows him the moonshine, and the ghost is like, oh, I'll tell you anything. And she's like, okay, here. And he's like, I can't take it. You have to drink it, and I'll taste it through you. She's like, no. So she takes a sip, and then he, like, dives through her neck. Ghost dives through her neck as she's swallowing, and that's how he tastes it. And he is just hooked on this moonshine stuff. So every swallow she takes, he gives her a name. I think she winds up getting 13 names of girls who have died under mysterious circumstances or been found dead that are, like, kind of obvious vampire killings. But by the end, she's drunk the whole bottle of moonshine. And she doesn't get drunk normally. She can drink all the gin and tonics she wants without getting drunk. But, because she's a half vampire and that makes her tolerance better. But this moonshine gets her drunk. So when she goes back to Bones, she tells him the information, but she's like, I think I'm drunk. And he's like, you weren't supposed to drink at all. You were just supposed to have a few sips. She's like, tell that to the ghost. So she's drunk, and she starts getting kind of, even though she's hated him this whole time, she has spent, a month and a half with him now, and she is like, he is really hot, and he hasn't, like, tried to kill me. Maybe he's a good vampire. So she's starting to have ambivalent feelings about him, even though it was like hate at first sight. So even she's drunk, he has to carry her, and it's this kind of romantic thing, and she's like, oh, he's so sexy. But that's just the drunk talking. So that's done. And she says something later where she's like, she tells him that she never went on a real date. But she had told him before that she wasn't a virgin, because he called her a virgin because she's so clearly acting virginal. But she didn't give him the details about what happened with that guy. So they have more deep, heartfelt conversations through all this, where he finds out her tragic backstory about the guy who used her and dumped her and took advantage of her, like, naivete. And she says she's never been on a real date. She goes to clubs all the time, but never on an actual date. They're always fake. They're always, like, missions. So he says soon, he's like, okay, tomorrow night we're going to go to this other club. And dress like your usual sexy self, but you can wear underwear this time because the guy we're going to meet will be attracted to you anyway. even if you're still wearing underwear, we don't need that extra step. And she's like, thank God. So he drives her out into the middle of nowhere where there's this like really hoppin' vampire club called Bite. And the vampire club is like where vampires and other supernatural creatures, we've got ghouls, we've got ghosts, and there were some other things there too. But they can bring humans there, and all the humans that go there are going because they are like groupies and they want to get their necks bit or whatever. So she's at the bar. She goes to the bar a couple times. I don't know if I'm like conflating these things, but it's still part of the story, so I'll tell you. So he's found out information about the guy he's looking for. The bad vampire he's looking for is named Hennessy. And apparently he thinks he'll be at this bar. But Hennessy is part of a group of vampires. He might be in charge of it. There might be someone else in charge, but he's part of a group of vampires that are kind of doing a sex slavery thing where they're kidnapping pretty young girls and they're selling them off. And those girls, first they get sold off to be like, you know, used as sex slaves, and then they get sold off to have all their blood drunk by a vampire, and then they get sold off to go to a ghoul who eats their flesh. So, you know, the vampire, like the woman can make a lot of money for this. So he wants to stop this ring of sex slavery murderers. So she's at the bar, she's waiting for her mark to show up, and then all of a sudden Bones sits down next to her. And he's like, hi, I'm the person you're waiting for. And she's like, no, you're not. Bones, get out of here. He's going to see you. And it turns out Bones was taking her on a date. He took her there because he wanted to just like take her out. And at first she's reluctant. She's like, I don't want to date with you. And he's like, come on, yes, you do. So she eventually softens up and she's like, okay. And then he says he wants to dance, but she doesn't know how to dance. So he teaches her how to dance. And it's like a very sensual, like hip, grindy dance they're doing. And, she's been drinking gin and tonics, and at one point these two human guys came up to her and they're like, let us buy you a drink. And they were like she thought they were really sweet and nice, and she's like, yay, more humans, hi friends. But there's one point where she like drops something on the floor and she bends down to pick it up and then gets back up and the guy's like, here's your drink. I'm like, oh no, he roofied her. So me as the reader, I know this. She doesn't know this. But apparently as a half vampire, she's very resistant to roofies, so she does start feeling kind of drunk, tipsy, but not like fully roofied. So she's out dancing with Bones, and like she's got this drug in her system and it's kind of lowering her inhibition, and then they start making out. And she's like, oh no, I'm kissing the guy I thought I hated him, but he's so sexy. And so they're making out. But as they're making out, he sees Hennessy walk into the club. And he's like, oh shit, Hennessy's here. She's like, what? The mob boss? The bad guy? Oh, let's get him now. And he's like, no, it's too dangerous. It's too risky. We didn't come here for that. We're not prepared. She's like, if you don't do it, I will. She's very headstrong and forceful. So he eventually reluctantly agrees. So she goes back to the bar and pretends to be alone. And then Hennessy gets drawn to her like a magnet because apparently she's a vampire magnet. And he's hitting on her and she's playing along. She says that she came there with someone who she was interested in, but now he's being a jerk, so she doesn't want to be on this first date anymore. And so Hennessy's like, I am a gentleman. I will take care of you. So then Bones comes up and tells them that he's the jerk she's on the date with. So then they stage this like little play acting that they do where she dumps him and then he leaves. And she's hanging out with Hennessy like he's her date now. And at one point, she goes to the bathroom because she's like kind of in over her head. And while she's in the bathroom, she sees, after she goes to the bathroom and she comes out, she sees Bones drinking the blood of one of the bite fetish people that's there. And she's not really jealous, but she's just like, oh, I'm seeing him in his vampire action for the first time. And he gets kind of defensive and he's like, what, you thought I didn't drink blood? She's fine. She won't even remember this. She likes it. She's into it. And she's like, okay, here's what's going on with Hennessy. I think we should do this and this and this. So they go back, and she goes back to the bar, but Hennessy's not there at some point. And those two human guys come up again, and they're like, we bought you another drink. And she's like, thanks, boys. And she drinks it, and she's like, oh, this one tastes kind of weird. I was like, roofied again. So then Hennessy comes back and he's like, all right, sexy lady, let's get out of here. And she's like, yes. So they're going to do the plan again where they drive out to the middle of nowhere and she's going to try to like battle him, and then Bones is going to show up and finish him off. But they have this system where if she gets in over her head and she needs him to come faster, she has a pager that she can page him. It's like a smartwatch before smartwatches existed. It's a pager watch. So Hennessy takes her out and she's all ready to do the plan, but she's starting to feel really dizzy, really woozy, really, she thinks she's drunk, but she's like, how did the alcohol get to me that fast? What's going on? Why do I feel so sick? I've never felt sick like this before in my life. And of course, obviously she's been roofied, and they made it like a super strong roofie because it didn't work the first time. So, So they get out and she's fighting Hennessy, and Hennessy's winning obviously because she's not at her full faculties, and he like rips off her clothes and sexually molests her, and it's very disturbing that she's getting, you know, sexually assaulted. But she, just before she passes out, she hits the pager, and then Bones shows up and they have a fight, and one of Hennessy's like bodyguards was there in the trunk of his car all along, so he jumps out, and well, Hennessy gets in his car and runs away, and so Bones kills the bodyguard. And then eventually she wakes up and he tells her all this. But he's also, as it turns out, those two guys who roofied her, he finds out that they went and roofied someone else. And this girl, they gave her triple strength roofies because the double strength didn't work on Kat. So this poor girl, who's only human, becomes dead by the triple strength roofies. And when Bones finds those two human guys raping this girl in their truck, this dead girl, he kills them both. And later on, she was like, why? What took you so long? And he's like, oh, that's why. Because I was off killing the date rapists. So Hennessy's still on the loose. He got away, and Bones is like, well, now he knows I'm after him. I've been chasing him for 11 years, and he didn't really know, but now he knows. But he doesn't know your name or who you are or anything, so your cover's not blown. We can still use you. We still have a chance at this. So next step is to try to get like more information about this guy. So they go out and they hunt more vampires, and they do like reconnaissance, and at one point they get another vampire who they do the thing where he's like, don't kill him first, I need to get information. So she like holds off on killing this guy, and he gives him information. And a lot of stuff happens. She's also starting college. So she enters college, and she is in her first week of college, and this one girl has been like really friendly to her and really sweet, and she's like, wow, I might actually have a friend for the first time in my life. So this girl invites her to go out clubbing with her, and so when she shows up at the girl's apartment, she's like, wow, this is a really fancy apartment. She must be really rich. The girl, who's been so nice all the time, says like, here, put this dress on. Your baggy jeans aren't cool enough for clubbing. So she takes off her clothes and is about to put the dress on, and the girl's like, aha, I knew you had a fantastic body now that I'm seeing you in your underwear. Perfect. And then she pulls a gun on her, and she's like, I am part of the white slavery ring, and I'm going to, turn you into a sex slave, and that's why my apartment's so fancy and why I get so much money. But of course she doesn't know Kat's a half vampire, so Kat fights her, and they're struggling over the gun, and then the gun goes off and it kills the girl. She was just human, even though she was hopped up on vampire blood, which also makes you stronger. So she was kind of a fight for her, but she accidentally kills a girl with the gun. It had a silencer. So all she knows how to do is call Bones, who she's had a fight with before this. So she was kind of like, I'm never speaking to him again. But now she calls, the reason they had the fight was because when she woke up after being drunk that night, or drugged, roofied, she told Bones, she was like, the only reason we made out and did stuff was because I was under the influence of drugs, and I never would have done that normally. I'm really not interested in you, and you must not be interested in me either. And he's like, don't tell me what I feel. And she's like, okay, bye. So he's mad that she's just saying, I was only into you because of the drugs, because he's clearly into her anyway. So she isn't talking to him, but she needs his help. So she calls him, and she's like, I just killed a human. I don't know what to do. So he comes over, and he helps her like clean up the body and get rid of the body. And they reunite. There's another part, I don't know if it becomes before or after this, where they track down this vampire, and they go to his apartment where they find out this girl has been kidnapped. So as the bait, he takes her to the apartment, and in the apartment is his roommate who's also a vampire, and she's like, oh no, I'm in over my head, and she finds out that they have another human girl like tied up in the next room that they've been abusing. So then it's a fight, and then Bones comes in and he kills one of them, and then that's the guy that they pump for information before they end up killing, and then they rescue the girl, and they take the girl. Oh, this happens, okay, I remember now. So this happens later on a road trip, or a plane trip. They fly there. So after they make out... Okay, sorry, I'm getting my order mixed up. Okay, so he helps her with the body, and their relationship is developing, and eventually decides he's so sexy, and they start making out, and they finally get to the point where they have sex together. And then she comes home the next morning, freaked out that she had sex with him. She just runs out the door. She goes home. She doesn't know she has hickeys all over her. Grandparents see her, and they're like, you've been consorting with the devil. And her parents are like mad at her. But then Bones shows up at her house, and he hypnotizes them into thinking he's a nice Christian girl who's going to take her on a Bible retreat. And then he takes her instead on a vampire slaying retreat to Charlotte, which is where they find those guys in the apartment, and they get the information, and then they burn down the whole apartment building to send a message to Hennessy. They're like, yeah, we're on your tail. We're going to catch you. And they rescue the girl, and she's still hypnotized and traumatized, so they take her to a lady who lives up in the Blue Ridge Mountains that's a friend of Bones, who runs a women's shelter up there because she too had an abusive husband that she escaped, and now she wants to help other girls. So they take the poor abused girl to her. She helps her, and even though she's like an elderly woman now, Kat's jealous because she thinks when she was young she must have been one of Bones's girlfriends, and she's like, he's mine now, I'm jealous, and she doesn't understand this jealous feeling that she's feeling. And then every time they meet another woman, she gets like insanely jealous and like possessive of Bones. She's like grabbing his butt, grabbing his crotch, just be like, my territory, with her new boyfriend. And it turns out that vampires are very territorial, so whenever Bones sees her with another man, he gets the same way. And it's just like this vampire instinct that they can't control, and she's having that instinct too. And later on, Bones is like, wow, the fact that you have the territorial, ragingly jealous instinct means you must really like me. Because even though they're sleeping together, she's just still like, this is just like business, and then we'll go our separate ways. She's really in denial about liking him. So after they leave that place, they go back home to Ohio. There's like a lot more intrigue with what's going on with them trying to track down the ring of, slavery people. Bunch of stuff happens. At one point she's in college and she wants to move into her own apartment. So because she earned money from the jobs of the bounty hunting so when Bones is going after these guys, they also have bounties on their head. So whenever he kills them, he reports them and he gets money. And he gives her a cut of it. But after they start sleeping together, she refuses to take the cut because she's like, that would make me feel like a whore. And so he's like, well, now you're basically paying me to sleep with you, so that makes me a whore, ha ha ha. But the first one she did take, and so she got $10,000 from that first job that she used to finally get her own apartment. So we do find out Bones' backstory before this, that in England, he was the son of a prostitute that worked in a brothel. And he grew up in the brothel, and when he got to be of age, the madam at the brothel was like, you could be a prostitute too. There's lots of men who would really want to, use your services. And he's like, no, it's too gay. And she's like, well, what about high-class ladies? Would you do it with high-class ladies? And he's like, yeah, I'd do that. So he becomes a prostitute working for high-class ladies, but he's also a pickpocket. And at one point he gets caught pickpocketing, and they're going to hang him because apparently that's a punishment for pickpocketing. But one of the high-class ladies that he was a whore for gets him off the hook and gets him sent off to Australia instead. So in Australia, he's working on like the chain gang and, doing awful things to the natives that all the white people down there are doing. And other people in his chain gang. One of them escapes. And then there's like a revolution, and then, So at one point, the one who escaped comes back. He's now a vampire. He went off to live with the natives, the Aboriginal people, and comes back a vampire. So I don't know if there's vampire Aborigines too, or what. Yeah. And then he makes his like besties on the chain gang into vampires as well. So it's Bones and like 3 other guys, one of which is named Charles, and he actually shows up later. So now we know Bones' tragic backstory, and the reason his name is Bones is because like when he first became a vampire, they buried him in the Aboriginal like burial ground, and when he woke up, he saw all those bones around him. So he's like, I am now Bones. It's like that Batman origin story where he's like, he looks up and he sees the bat, and he's like, Batman. So she finally gets her own apartment. She does it. It's kind of a shitty apartment, but she's happy with it. Her mom helps her move in, and now she has a place where like Bones can come over and they can have sex and whatever and be happy and don't have to do it in a cave. And she meets her neighbor, who's this really like dorky, awkward, sweet guy, and she's like instantly best friends with him because he's safe and inoffensive, and he's obviously into her. Because who isn't? She's super hot, sexy, half vampire lady. But she's like, no, we'll just be friends. I have a boyfriend. So they hang out. And at one point, Bones comes over and meets him, and he gets really jealous. And that's when we see the whole like jealousy territorial thing. And she makes Bones apologize to him. And it's very dramatic. And then at one point, her mom comes over. And so she had told her mom previously that the reason she was gone for so long was that she had met a guy, hence the hickeys on her neck that she got in trouble for. And she's sleeping with this guy, but he's also a vampire hunter slayer like her, and he's on the good side, and he's helping her slay vampires. She doesn't tell her mom he is a vampire. So her mom's like, okay, well, having a boyfriend out of wedlock is kind of, but whatever, be safe. So her mom comes over and surprises her at the apartment. And Bones isn't there, but there's like stuff around that, or she's expecting Bones to come, something, and her mom is kind of being too nosy, and then Timmy, the neighbor, pokes his head in the door. Mom's like, is that your boyfriend? And Kat gets this idea, and she's like, yes. So she goes and grabs him, and she's like, play along. So she's like, this is my boyfriend. See how sweet and gentle and inoffensive he is, and just like a good Christian boy. And he's like, my mom's crazy. Pretend like everything's normal. So her mom starts talking about how like she's a demon slayer and how Timothy is helping her slay demons, and she's like, just pretend it's normal. So Timmy plays along, and he's like, oh yeah, slaying the demons, hallelujah, amen, righteous hand of God. And he's pretty good at it. And he convinces the mom, and then the mom leaves, and she's like, thanks, Timmy, I owe you one. And Timmy's like, I really would be your boyfriend if you wanted. She's like, no, thanks, bye. And there's another point where Bones is over there, and they're in bed, and then the mom comes, another surprise visit, and she has to shove Bones in the closet and be like, hide. And then she tells her mom she has a migraine, and she can't see her mom. And her mom's like, why do you keep pushing me away? And so Bones is kind of mad. And he's like, when are you going to tell your mom the truth about us? And she's like, never. You're a vampire? The thing she hates most in the world? And he's like, but why, like, what's more important, being with me or appeasing her? And are you gonna lie to your mom all your life? And she's like, yes. So she has a talk with Timmy later, and Timmy was like, why couldn't you have your mom meet your real boyfriend? And she's like, because he's English, and she got raped by an Englishman once, and she's prejudiced against English people. And he's like, so she really hates an entire country full of people just because of one guy? That's not cool. Like, she should understand that, everyone's different, and that's crazy talk. And Kat's like, you know what? You're right. I shouldn't have to be ashamed of who I'm with. He's a good person. I know that all vampires aren't evil now, and I should just be honest with my mom. So, earlier, they had gone, they're trying to find Hennessy, and they had gone to a house where this vampire, so the ones they tried to find didn't know where Hennessy was, but they told him where someone else was. So they go to that house where someone else was, and her name is Lola, and she's this very like high class Asian vampire, and Bones tries to get information out of him, but she like pulls weapons on him, and the vampire that she'd like kidnapped to lead them there starts fighting her. So and then like 2 more vampires come out of the house, so she kills them all before they can get any information. The only information that they got was like died there. They find out the name of who Hennessy's main henchman is, which is Switch, but that's all they find out. And Bones is mad. He's like, why'd you kill them all before I could get any information? She's like, sorry, I keep doing that. So they think they've hit a dead end. At one point, Bones's old best friend from Australia comes to visit, and she walks into the cave and she sees this guy, and she's like, oh no, Bones is under attack by this random vampire. So she attacks him and they have a fight until Bones eventually comes home. He's like, why are you sitting on my best friend? And she's like, oh, haha, awkward. And this guy doesn't really serve much purpose. He like goes off and he's like, I'm going to help you find stuff too. He's just kind of there just to prove that Bones has friends, I guess. But he eventually gets news that one of Hennessy's main sidekicks wants to switch sides and become a good vampire. Which, earlier, when they were interrogating the guy before they like left the house that they burned down, Bones started acting like he wanted to switch sides, and she was like, oh no, has he been playing me all along? Was he really going to switch sides and join the bad vampires? He was like, no, it was an act. That's the whole point of our fake out here. Why would you doubt me like that? And he's really hurt. So now they find someone who actually does want to switch sides, and her name is Francesca. So they go to see her. Charlie and Bones, Charlie's nickname is Spade, and he's a white guy. So she's like, isn't that kind of racist? And he's like, no, it's because when I was on the chain gang, I dug ditches with my spade, and the overseer just called me by the tool I used. I wasn't a person, I was a tool to him. So we were all named after our tools, and that's why I'm Spade. It's not racist, I swear. So they go to see this lady, Francesca, a vampire, and she's like the hottest, sexy Latina stereotype that you've ever seen, and like the complete stereotype of a hot, seductress Latina. And she's got like this big booty and big boobs and a teeny tiny waist, and her like lips are all big, and she's so sexy. And so Kat is instantly jealous. She doesn't know if this lady has a history with Bones or not, but she's like groping him all over. And that's when we find out later that it's a vampire trait that she does that. And it's just proof that she loves Bones after all, because he was kind of doubting it because she didn't trust him earlier. So Francesca tells them that she wants to betray Hennessy. He's her maker, so she can't just leave him. And she can't really do anything because he has this power over her. He's her vampire sire. But she wants to betray him. She doesn't know the names of the other people to get to him either. So she's like, I'm going to start snooping for you guys and give you any information I can get. Oh, thank you, Victoria Stark, for the $5 Canadian. Am I the only one who's tired of the trend of jealousy being seen as a sign of love instead of sign of abuse or something to be addressed? Yes, you are not the only one. When I saw her being like so possessive and jealous, and Bones being so possessive and jealous, I was just like cringing. I was like, this is kind of problematic. And then it's explained as a vampire trait, and I was like, okay, maybe that's one of the negative vampire traits they have. That's okay. Vampires are allowed to have positive traits and negative traits. Bones likes it that she's all jealous over him because it's a sign that she loves him, but she doesn't like it when he's all jealous over her. She's like, not cool. You can't treat my friends that way. Stop. So they kind of go both ways, but yeah, it was one of the things that made me cringe about the book. So Francesca, when they all sit down on the couch, when she crosses her legs, they see straight up her skirt, and she's not wearing underwear, and she's just like, she just flashed her, bits at us, and she's like super jealous. But Francesca tells them all this, and they leave, and so Francesca's been in contact with them, trying to give them information. She finds out little things, but not anything really great. And during this time, Bones and Kat have a fight, and I think maybe this is when the mom comes over and she pretends to have a migraine, and then she has to talk with Timmy later. So like Bones is like, well, I'm leaving if you can't even love me as I am. And that's when she has to talk with Timmy over like 3 pints of Ben and Jerry's, and he convinces her to like accept that he's a vampire. So she goes running back to her. She's after 5 days of like crying into her ice cream. She goes back, and she's about to call Bones and tell him like, I've decided I do want to admit to my mother that I love a vampire, and who cares if she disowns me. But as she tries to call Bones, he's like, I was just about to call you because something's wrong with Francesca. She's disappeared. We don't know what's going on. And she's like, oh no. So they suspect Francesca has gotten caught snooping and that Hennessy has done something to her. They know he wouldn't kill her because she's his own child, and it would seem like it would make him look bad if he did that, so he might just have her somewhere torturing her or something. So they go all around looking for her everywhere, can't find her anywhere. They go back to the vampire club because it's a safe zone. It's like Elysium, and no one can fight there, so they think that's where she might have gone to be safe, and but she's not there. And as they're driving home, they see like a traffic jam on the side of the road, and it's just the side of the road where they buried a body previously, and they're like, oh shit. But because they have super hearing, they find out that they found a body there, and the police have it all roped off, and there's police squad cars there, so all the traffic has to go into one lane, so it's like a really long jam. And when they finally get by, they look at the body, and the body's all shriveled and turned into a skeleton corpse, but they see her hair and they recognize Francesca's hair, and they're like, oh no, she's dead. Hennessy must have killed her. And Bones is like, no, he wouldn't do that. He would never kill his own vampire baby. She must have killed herself, because no one else would have been able to touch her, knowing that she was Hennessy's baby. Only person who killed her was herself. She must have done it as a final act of defiance to Hennessy, and then Hennessy took her body and dumped it there as a sign to us that he knows that we were using her and that he's on to us. Yeah. So now, like, the stakes are raised. They're like, if he's on to us, we could be in more danger. So she goes back home, and then some cops show up at her door. And they're like, are you Catherine, blah, blah, blah? And she's like, yes, what do you want? He's like, we found a body last night, and etc. And she's like, why would that have anything to do with me? And eventually comes out that the police suspect her because the other body they found was one of the ones she had killed years ago. It was the first vampire she ever killed when she was 16. So earlier when she was at a club, like, trying to be vampire bait, her old boyfriend, the guy who abused her and left her, whose name is Danny, showed up, and he was like, oh my god, I haven't seen you in so many years, you're way hotter now, this is great. And she's like, get lost, scum. But Bones has already said that if he ever runs into Danny, he's gonna kill him. So Bones comes up, and he's like shaking Danny's hand, and he crunches all the bones in his hand, turns his hand to pulp. But she's like, don't kill him, don't kill him. He doesn't deserve it, and I couldn't live with it being on my conscience. Let's just leave. So they do. But Danny had ratted her out to the police, saying that when she was 16, so, 6 years ago, he saw her leaving a bar with a guy who then was the guy they later found dead, and the car matched and everything. And so that's why the police suspect her, because Danny ratted her out. And she's like, damn it, I should have let Bones kill him. I couldn't. And so they connected her to the murders. And as soon as they leave, she's like, crap, I have to go to Bones, but they're probably following me, so I have to make it look really discreet. So she dresses in like commando gear, like black spandex pants and shirt. And she goes to the mall and she does some shopping, and then she goes back to goes and runs in the wood in a bunch of circles, and she's like, okay, I've lost them. And she finally goes to Bones' cave. Thank you, JRL Studios, for the $4.99. How many pages is this book? You're describing Vampire War and Peace, but right? So much stuff happens in this book, and I'm sure I'm skipping stuff. Usually I read the book like the day before our book club, or 2 days before, because I want to have it fresh in my head. So I just finished this yesterday, and I'm like, I've already forgotten so much. So much happened in this book. How am I ever going to summarize this book? I should have taken notes. I never take notes for book club. I really should. This book is only 374 pages, which is not that long. It's not that long. It's just very action heavy. Just like action, 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 action. And I've left so much out already, like some of the smaller details. So she gets to Bones' cave, and she's like, Bones, they found me. The cops were at my door. And he's like, oh shit, if they know your identity, then Hennessy knows your identity. Where are your parents? Where's your mom and grandparents? And she's like, oh no. So she goes, they rush to her house, and they walk in, and her grandparents are dead. There's blood everywhere, and her mom is missing. And they're freaking out, but the cops had followed her, so they eventually catch up, and they come into the house like before they can leave, and then there's like a gun battle. I think she gets shot. She does get shot at one point. I don't know if this is the time she gets shot or she got shot later. She ends up getting shot a lot. But they get out, they escape the cops, they run into the woods, they run away. They hypnotize a guy who's driving through the windshield, just hypnotizes him, makes him stop his car. They steal his car and they drive off. And they keep going until they get to like a safe space. They switch cars again, and he's like, he's figured out who... Hold on, give me a moment. It's coming back to me. Oh, there was a note, right? So the vampires who killed her grandparents left a note. It's this really like cryptic, weird note, but he can understand it. And the note tells them where to meet them, at what time, to get her mother back, because her mother's still alive. So they go to the place at the time, and she's still like covered in blood, because she didn't want to wash the blood off, because the blood is her war paint, and she's not going to wash it off until she saves her mother. And they had gone to like a seedy motel at one point. And they think that they're about to walk into this unwinnable situation. They say, oh, if Bones turns himself over, because Bones is the guy we really want, we'll give the mother back. And he's like, it's a trap. They're not going to do it. They're just going to kill all of us. So they think they're going to die. So they have like CD motel. We're going to die soon sex. And then they go off to the rendezvous point. They meet them. He all this time has been like, don't come with me, you're out of the plan, I love you too much for you to put yourself in danger. And every single time she's like, no, this is my fight too, I'm gonna be there, I'm gonna be in danger. And she wears him down every time, no matter how many times he tries to get her to not come along. He always loses that fight. So they come up with a plan. They have a sneaky plan. So they go to the rendezvous point. They're in their car. The vampires are there, and they're like, okay, we're going to escort you to where we're going. And they drive in a formation where it's like Bones' car in the middle, and then vampires flanking it like front and sides, and nothing in the back. So they escort them in this motorcade to the house where the headquarters of the sex slavery ring is. And they get there, and they're parked outside. And they're like, okay, we'll send the mom out as soon as Bones comes in and turns himself over. And they're like, we don't believe you. Send the mom out first. And they're like, no. So they show the mom's face in the window. She is still alive, and that's all they're going to get. So Bones goes in. Of course, the mom doesn't get sent out. The vampire henchman Switch comes out, and she's just like, you're Switch? And he's like, yeah, I'm the one who killed your grandparents. And she's like, oh, I hate you. So, since there's no car in front of them, the cars are flanking them on all sides, but not in front of them, she just starts a car and she drives straight into Switch. He goes like flipping over the car, and she drives straight through the wall of the house and like Kool-Aid mans her way into the house. After she's just called the cops and told the cops where she is, and she's like, come and get me. So now the cops are coming. So inside the house, they thought there'd be a bunch of vampires, but they thought they could handle it. Oh, before this also, she drank a bunch of Bones' blood. And this is her first time drinking his blood more than just a few drops to heal herself. She drinks a ton of his blood. And if she was shot, that heals the shot wound. But, so all of his, now she has like super vampire powers. And she's like, is this what it's like to be a vampire? No wonder you guys love it so much. This is great. And he's like, yeah, but those powers will wear off after about a week, because it doesn't last that long because you're not a real vampire. And she's like, fine by me. So she uses her super vampire powers to slam into the house. Then she jumps out, throwing knives and like using all her weapons, her silver stick. She's very good at throwing knives, and it's distraction enough that Bones gets away and he starts fighting. So between the two of them, they kill, there's 20 vampires there and like 7 humans, but I think these humans are all just the girls upstairs. They're fighting, and the two of them almost kill all 20 vampires. Towards the end, after this huge fight, there's only like a few left. Of course, Switch and Hennessy are still left. So she's fighting Hennessy, and the way she gets the upper hand is they get wedged between the car and the wall where it like Kool-Aid Man through the house, and his mouth is like right here. So he's biting into her neck and like peeling her neck away, and she's like, oh no, if he gets up to my like jugular, that'll be the end of me. And she's holding him off like this from stabbing her. So the only way that she can like actually kill him is if she lets him go, lets him get to her neck, but she does it fast enough that she ends up stabbing him through the back, and then she ends up killing Hennessy. Yay, Hennessy is dead, but Switch gets away. Switch, the one who actually killed her grandparents, gets away, and she's mad about that. And I think a couple others get away, but most of them don't. Her mom's safe, the girls upstairs are safe. But the cops have shown up at one point during this, and bullets are flying because the cops actually brought guns. Guns don't really hurt vampires, but they can hurt her. So she gets shot through the shoulder. So I don't know if this is the second time she got shot or just the first. I think this is the first time she got shot, actually. So she gets shot through the shoulder, and that's part of what's making fighting really hard for her. So after she kills Hennessy, she's finally like, I give up. Bones is left. He's run off after Switch into the woods. So she turns herself over to the police. The police put her in, arrest her, put her in the back of a squad car. They're getting the girls and her mom out, and they're taking them to the hospital. And she's in the back of the squad car, like getting ready to be taken to jail when a lieutenant shows up. And the lieutenant's like, I'll take her from here. And they're like, this is not protocol. This is not regulations. He's like, fuck your regulations. I'm taking her. So he puts her in his car. And he's gonna drive her to the real person behind it. So all this time they've known that the vampire slavery ring had a high-powered human that was running the shots, and they think it might be a high-powered judge, or it could be the sheriff or the chief of police. It's someone. Turns out it's the governor of all of Ohio. So this lieutenant, who's one of the human flunkies, takes her to the governor, and he tells her that after he drops her off, he's got a bomb in the trunk of his car, and he's going to take that bomb to the hospital where the 7 girls and her mom were taken, and blow up that hospital so, no loose ends, no witnesses will survive. So she, starts fighting him, and she gets a hold of his gun because he underestimates her, and she makes him drive at gunpoint the rest of the way. And she gets there, and he's like, they're never going to let us in like this. And so she takes off her top and her bra. So she's like half naked. She's like, okay, pretend you're bringing me as a sex slave, as like some entertainment. And so when they drive past the guard at the governor's mansion, he's just like, see this half naked chick in the back? And she's like, these are my boobs. So they're like they're getting up to where the house is. And she's like, okay, I'm going to go put my shirt back on. And that's when he like gets the upper hand of her. And then she ends up having to shoot him, and she kills him. And then there's like, a battle. She battles her way into the house. She's killing people left and right. She gets up to where the governor is. She's been shot multiple times by now. She hasn't been shot yet. So she gets up to where the governor is, and she's like, great, I'm almost there, and I'm going to kill this guy. Because we know the reason the governor had wanted to team up with the vampires because he wants to run for president. So he thinks if he makes Ohio look great by where did all the homeless people and drug addicts go? They just disappeared. The governor really cleaned up our streets. That was a deal he had with the vampires. He was like, I will help you vampires run your sex slavery ring of the sexy ladies if you also kill off all the homeless people and drug addicts in Ohio, and people will think that I'm the best governor ever and will help my presidential campaign. And he's also getting money from it too, so it's funding his campaign. So she gets up to his room, and didn't expect him to have a gun, so he shoots her a couple times. So she like falls to the floor and she's like staggering. He's like, oh, you're just a human woman, so I have just basically gotten the upper hand. He underestimates her. A bunch of like his bodyguards come up and he's like, I got this, you guys can leave. And she's like, that was your fatal flaw. So she goes up to him and she like rips his head off, because she has the power to do that now because she drank all of Bones' blood. And then the police show up and she's like, I surrender again. So she gets arrested and she gets taken to the hospital because she's got bullet wounds now. So the hospital treats her, but because of the vampire blood she drank, she has super healing powers, and so the bullets just pop out, and like after a few hours she's completely healed. And she doesn't know why she's still at the hospital and why they haven't just taken her to jail yet. But she knows her mom is in that hospital somewhere too. So then, as she's in the hospital, an FBI agent comes into her room with like this CIA ops bodyguard with him. And he's like, we know vampires are real. We know you have special powers. We know you're really good at killing vampires. We want you to come work for us at the not FBI, the X-Files, to train an elite squad of vampire hunters, and we can go around America killing vampires, slaying vampires. It's what you already do anyway. Now you have more resources to do it. And she's like, what? No. She's not into this for some reason. She's really against this. And then the guy is like, oh, did you know your mom's here? You want to see your mom? Though at one point, she's still pretending that vampires aren't real. She's like, I don't know what you're talking about. You're lying. I don't know what you're talking about. I'm just a normal human girl. So then he tells the bodyguard to shoot her as a direct order. And so she like rips the bar off the bed that she's handcuffed to and jumps them both. She knocks out the bodyguard, breaks his arm, and shatters the kneecaps of the FBI agent. And they're like, ha! We knew it. We caught you. And she's like, fine, you got me, vampires are real. So then he like has her mom wheelchaired over to her room and he steps out. She talks to her mom. And the mom's like, I learned the truth that you were sleeping with that vampire because they told me so when I was kidnapped, and you've had a vampire boyfriend all along. How could you? Don't you know all vampires are evil? And she's like, but not this guy, and some of them aren't, because some of them don't even kill people, and I only kill the bad ones. And her mom's like, no, I will not be swayed. I disown you. You're not my daughter anymore. And she's like, well, I still love you. And so then the mom leaves. And then the FBI agent comes back in a wheelchair because his kneecaps are shattered. And he's like, okay, you love your mom, right? She's not going to, like, support you being with a vampire. You have this friction between you. Your identity's out there. People, the vampires know who you are, so they'll always try to use your mom against you. You can't keep her safe because she's not into you. She doesn't want to be near you. So if you come work for us, we'll keep both of you safe. We'll give you like places to live. She'll be fine. You'll be fine. And so eventually Kat realizes that her only choice is to agree to go work for them. But it would mean giving up her relationship with Bones, because they also believe all vampires are evil. They don't believe Bones is one of the good ones. So there's still so much more of this to tell you. You thought I was almost done. So she agrees, and she's like, fine, but I have terms and conditions. I'm in charge. No one's going to boss me around. You give me a place to live. You give me money. You give me this. I'm only going to do this for 10 years. And they come into all these compromises. And he's like, great. Welcome to the FBI. And the guy whose arm she shattered, who's like really mean to her all this time, he starts being nicer. And he's like, he's going to be the first one on your squad. And she's like, only if I say so, because I get to pick the squad. And okay, fine. So she doesn't know where Bones is. The last she saw Bones, he was running off after Switch to never be heard from again. And they ask her where he is, and she's like, I don't know, maybe he's dead, trying to play it cool. And Bones had previously told her that he would always find her, no matter where she was, because she had finally admitted she loved him, right, when they had their like really sad moment. Because before he would say that he loved her, but she would never say it back, because she's like, I care for him, but I don't. But yeah, she had finally said it back. So now they're like truly in love. So they're going to transport her to the place to like go to join the FBI. So they got this like intense motorcade driving her, where she's in the middle car, and then there's cars flanking her. And I guess mom is still back at the hospital, and they're driving her to like the helicopter when Bones appears just standing in the middle of the street, and he just stands there till her car rams into him, like crunches into him, and the car behind smashes, and the other two cars go past, and then they try to turn back and go this, but then the other oncoming traffic smashes into them. It's just like domino effect, huge like 50 car pile up, and then all the cars going the opposite direction on the highway slow down to like stare at this, and they start getting smashed into, and then there's like, you know, traffic on both sides. So Bones comes and he rescues her, even though she had like decided that she couldn't be with him, and even if he did rescue her, she couldn't stay with him anyway because it would put her mom in danger. So he takes the two guys out of the car, the ones that she was starting to like, that were going to be on her team, and he like flings them up in the air like 50 feet high in the air, and they smash down onto the ground. One of them survives, and he does wind up being on her team. He's like, heck yeah, I want to be on your team now. That was so cool. So Bones takes her, and they drive off away, and they're in this like fancy new Volvo, and she's like, you stole this car too? And he's like, no, this is your car. And she's like, well, I know it's mine now, but he's like, no, it was going to be your Christmas present. I bought it for you. And she's like, oh wow, that's such a nice Christmas present. I bought you a coat, a jacket. And he's like, what did the jacket look like? And she's like, well, it was really long and black leather to make you look really badass and cool in the night. So basically like the badass long coat trope, like the coat Spike wears in Buffy. Long black leather trench coat. But he never gets it because she can't give him a Christmas present anymore. So he gets her mom too. I guess her mom had been coming with him. So he gets the mom too. And they put the mom in the car, and the mom's like fighting. She doesn't want to go. So he eventually like she knocks the mom out. And he's like, I'm glad you knocked her out. Otherwise I would have had to do it. So he drives them off to this like cabin in the woods where a friend of his lives. His friend is a ghoul. So basically a zombie, a flesh eater. He's like, we can lay low with this friend for the night. And then tomorrow we can drive off to Canada to disappear for a while. And meanwhile, the mom is like, I would never go live with a vampire. She's being really troublesome. So Kat tells her, she's like, shh, Mom, play along. Pretend like we're going along with this. I'll get us out of here. So she locks her mom in the basement. Or she takes her mom into the bathroom, and they have this like really secret conversation by writing messages in the steam on the mirror that they're going to betray Bones and leave him so that she can still go join the FBI, because she knows it's the only way to keep her mom safe. She knows Bones' way won't work. And then she locks her mom in the basement and goes upstairs and has sex with Bones as like final goodbye sex. And he has no idea. So the next day he's about to go off and get supplies for their mission, and he's going to be gone for a few hours with his zombie friend. She's like, wait, leave your jacket with me. I'm cold. I need your coat. He's like, oh, okay. So he gives her his like signature jean jacket that he always wears. I'm guessing it's a black jean jacket because he mostly only wears black. I don't think he would be wearing like stonewashed denim jacket. So Bones leaves to go get supplies, and then she and her mom escape. She leaves Bones a note explaining that this was the only way she could keep her mom safe. She had no choice. She had to betray him and join the FBI. It was the only thing she had to do. So she drives back. She digs up one of the bodies that she had buried a while ago. She puts Bones' jean jacket on him. Of course, his body is like smithered to like skeletons. Like the police know that all vampires do by now. So then the cops come to her, and she's like, look, it's Bones. He's dead. He's wearing his jacket. You can't see his face because he's all shriveled up like a corpse. And they're like, yes, we believe that that's Bones. We will never look for Bones again because he is clearly dead. She's like, I have saved Bones now. So they take her and her mom and drive off into the sunset to go join the FBI. And she's like, somewhere, Bones, I still love you, but this was the only way. And I had to give up love to have a future, but you know, life is life, and love isn't the only thing in life, and just having life in general I should be grateful for, and I'm gonna like make the world a better place. You know, so sort of a bittersweet ending, but she's empowered, she has grown, she feels like she is making a right choice for herself, even though it was under coercion. It's not the FBI's fault that her mom is in danger, and the FBI is the only thing that they didn't like blackmail her into joining them. They offered her the one thing she needed, and she couldn't get that anywhere else, so she had to take it. So that's how the book ends, going off to join the elite ops, and yeah. Never to see Bones again. She's convinced she'll never see him again and that they're broken up forever. But of course they're not. We know they're not, right? The end! By the way, what time is it? What time is it? 9:53. I've been talking to you about this book for an hour, because I'm sure we started a little later than actually 8:30, because, you know, we always warm up first. Yeah, so this book had a lot to talk about, a lot in it, a lot to summarize. I'm impressed by how much I remembered. I was afraid I was going to forget so much. I did forget many things, obviously, and I had to tell you some things out of order, but I always do that. So yeah, that's the first book. There are many books in this series. I happen to have books 2 and 3, which is One Foot in the Grave. She's on a motorcycle. She's again in her sexy wear, so I guess she keeps using the sexy wear as part of her disguise. And the other one is At Gravesend. Look at her in that crouchy position. How underworld is that? Well, thank you, Lindsay P, for the $4.99. Thanks for putting together Vampire Book Club. You are welcome. I'm so happy that you are here in Vampire Book Club to join me. I'm going to read you the summary of what book 2 is, because after all that, you deserve to know what's going to happen next and whether she'll ever even see Bones again. Like, I looked at some of the other book covers and it looked like she was with a guy with brown hair. Oh, yeah, here, look. She's with a guy with brown hair who can't be Bones, right? Bones has bleached blonde hair like Spike. We do know his natural hair color is brown, so maybe he unbleaches his hair before they get back together. Or maybe she's with another guy, right? So this says, you can run from the grave, but you can't hide. Half-vampire Cat Caulfield is now Special Agent Cat Caulfield, working for the government to rid the world of the rogue undead. She's still using everything Bones, her sexy and dangerous ex, taught her. But when Cat is targeted for assassination, the only man who can help her is the vampire she left behind. See, I knew he would come back. Being around him awakens all her emotions, from the adrenaline kick of slaying vampires side by side to the reckless passion that consumed them. Yeah, this book had one very graphic, detailed sex scene, and then a bunch of other like sort of mini sex scenes that were much less graphic. But the like first time sex is very graphic in this book, if you like reading porn. But a price on her head, wanted, dead, or half alive, means her survival depends on teaming up with Bones. Oh, darn. And no matter how hard she tries to keep things professional between them, she'll find out that the desire lasts forever, ... and that Bones won't let her get away again. That's what he promised. He promised he would never let her get away, that he would always find her again. Oh, thank you, JRL Studios, for the $1.99. For every Spike, there is an angel. You think this is an angel? Have you read these books? Do you know? Is it going to be a love triangle situation? According to some reviewers, they toned down the sex details in the later books, I think. I mean, it was only like one scene, but okay. Part of Bones' training for her to be vampire bait was to be less naive and less embarrassed about sex stuff. So she's like, okay, you're going to meet this guy who's like a real pervert, and he's going to talk to you in a really perverted way. So you have to be prepared to listen to this and not blush, not get uncomfortable, not go tee-hee. So he trains her by telling her all the sexual acts he wants to do to her. And this is before they ever get together. So she thinks he's just making stuff up to shock her, and she's, you know, has to get through it without flinching or without blushing. And she eventually does it. So when she does go meet that guy, she's using a lot of really sexy words, and then now that she's trained on sexual dirty talk, innuendo comes up a lot. There is that only one major sex scene. But this is part of avonromance.com, which makes me think it was sold as a romance novel. It's technically not a romance novel, because every romance novel is supposed to have a happily ever after ending, or a happily for now ending, and this has a very sad for now ending. So it doesn't follow like the usual romance formula. It has some of the tropes, like there's like an end of Act 2 breakup moment, but that's not the plot. A romance novel is a novel where the romance is the plot. Here, this is a novel with romance, so I don't know why it was part of this romance website. But maybe that's how it was sold. So even though this is not a romance, it was sold as a romance, so of course it had to have that sex scene in it. But if you're saying that the sex gets toned down in later books, maybe she finally got to embrace what her books really were, which is very typical urban fantasy with all the urban fantasy tropes, which often usually does have romance as a subplot with, sexual elements sometimes, but it's not the focus of the story. So that would make sense to me. Oh, there's Jeaniene Frost. Look how happy she is. Oh. All right, I've seen the chat going. I wasn't able to really see much except the super chat. So if you asked me questions earlier, now is your chance to ask again. I'll try to scroll up and see if there's anything I missed. If you said something in our book club Discord chat that I didn't mention here, thoughts, feelings, opinions, share them now again so I can say them for the club. Some long romance series can be slow burn, take multiple books to culminate. Yeah, if they're sold as a series, not sold as like a one-off book. This is definitely a romance book. I would say it's just not a romance book. I think this came out on the Twilight wave for vampire romance. I think not. I think it was coincidental because the Twilight wave didn't really start until the movie came out, which was 2008. Twilight 1 came out in 2005. It did very well, but it wasn't like we have to get hot commodity, all the vampire romances we can get now, until the movie came out and it really took off. So, and this would have, if this came out in 2007, that means she would have been working on it in 2005, so she probably had conceived it well before she even knew Twilight existed, if she ever even read it at all. By the time she was selling it to a publisher, they might have been aware that had a suspicion vampires were going to be big, and that's why they sold it. But I think she was a prolific author even before this. I don't think this was her first novel ever, was it? So she might have not needed that kind of foot in the door. So this book says there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 books in the series. I don't know if it ended at that 8th book or that was just when this book came out. There were only 8 out so far. What, if anything at all, are the vampires a metaphor in this novel? The vampires are a metaphor for prejudice and assumptions. So the analogy she uses when she pretends that the reason her mom hates her boyfriend is English, and Timmy's you can't hate a whole country just based on one person. So you can't hate a whole species of vampires just because your birth father was a rapist. And understanding that seeing through that prejudice is important, letting go of your trauma in order to get past the prejudice. It's not just bigotry for no reason or because they have a sense of superiority to the other. It's fear. So prejudice based on fear, and overcoming that and seeing a greater picture and seeing the other as people and learning that there's layers to them. So sort of a racial allegory there. Oh, so the reason Bones didn't Jedi Master brainwash Dani is because he wanted Dani to know who hurt him and why. He wanted Dani to know that his hand got crushed to a pulp as punishment for the way he treated Kat in the past. If he was brainwashed and he just woke up and his hand was crushed, he wouldn't have learned that lesson. He wouldn't know why he was being punished. So that's why he didn't brainwash Dani. You don't see in Our Vampires Are Different thing in the plot summary. I mean, it does the thing where it's no, crosses don't work, holy water doesn't work, we don't follow those regular vampire tropes, religion has nothing to do with it. She asked him where original vampires came from. He's like, you want the creationist answer or the evolutionary answer? She's like, creationist, because I'm a believer. I believe in God, because she's a good little Christian girl. Even though she's not so good anymore. Naughty little Christian girl. And he's like, well, if you believe in religion, then Cain and Abel, Cain was the first vampire. The mark of Cain is vampires, and we are all descended from Cain. Clearly, he doesn't believe that origin story. He believes the evolutionary story, which is that vampirism is a mutation. I don't know how mutation can be infectious, but That's the word he uses. But yeah, it has nothing to do with crosses and holy water and all that stuff. Only silver works. So the ways to kill vampires are different. The vampire powers, the way their eyes glow felt kind of unique to me. Like, yes, vampires often have glowy eyes, but the reason their eyes glowed and the way they could tell each other were vampires by the glowing, and the way the glow could like reveal something that they didn't want to be revealed. They glowed when they got turned on. They glowed when they were angry, like anytime they were overly passionate. So she also has to learn to control her glow eyes so that vampires don't see her eyes glowing and know that she is secretly a half vampire. Is red food coloring safe to mix with wind down beverages? Yes. Mutation in a virus or parasite that merges with the host? Maybe. And then the virus would be infectious. Could be. Did I like this book enough to continue the series? I'd say so. I mean, I'm not like jumping to read the next book. I'm not like, oh, I gotta read it. I'm like, oh, maybe I'll come back to it in the future. I'm not turned off or anything to not want to read the series. I did have some qualms with the book, but maybe they get better in the later books. I definitely would give it that chance. Where did the Cain as origin of vampires trope start? I feel like there's a bunch of properties that use that concept. I don't know where it really started or what the first one to use it. I think just with folklore, with vampire folklore. She clearly did not invent it. I don't know if she stole it from Vampire the Masquerade, because she did have some other Vampire the Masquerade-y tropes in here that were very specifically from that, which makes me think she was aware of the property. Or it could be a coincidence, because they are common tropes, right? So Vampire the Masquerade was like mid-90s, but I feel like the Cain thing has existed long before that. Same with Lilith as the original vampire, right? Like, that's a very common folklore thing. If 1 out of every 5 people are vampire, that's well over 1 billion vampires, right? Whether it's that or the other statistic, it was 5 was in there somewhere. It was still a lot of vampires. And she does have this conversation at one point with one of the bad guys where she's like, there are so many of you out there. Surely you can like do these things that are good for society. And they have a lot of conversations about how, oh, you think vampires are bad for eating people? Well, how awful have humans been to other humans? What about genocides? What about the slavery rings that humans do? Vampires aren't any worse than humans. Your humans have committed atrocities just as much as vampires. So that's another sort of vampire metaphor here, is to like look in the mirror. Don't see just the other as the bad guy when your own society is doing things equally bad. And most vampires don't kill people and don't sell people into slavery. They just, drink and live their lives just fine. How do they feed? 1 out of 5 would be permanent anemia. Yeah, I forget. I'm gonna have to go back and look it up. It was something with 5. I don't think it was 1 out of 5 because that's the statistic for how many queer people there are in the world, and I feel like I would have remembered that relationship. So maybe it's some other percentage. Maybe it was 5 out of something else. 5 out of 20 or something. Do I think Bones crossed the line from homage to infringement? You mean with Spike? No, I don't think so. Bones was good all along. Bones had always been good. He wasn't evil and then turned good like Spike did. And I think the bleached hair and the accent are really the only things that are spiky about him. Maybe just being snarky. But, all vampires and romances are snarky. And it's hate at first sight, which is also a very common romance trope. I don't think it was infringement at all. Because, everything he did, his backstory, his life, the way he lived his life, his job, I don't think it was very spiky. Does Kat ever acknowledge that some of the vampires she killed might have been good ones? Yes, she has that epiphany at one point that she could have just been killing guys that were looking for a date, that did just want to sip a little bit of her blood while they were getting laid. And they could have been perfectly innocent people. And Bones calls her on this, and at first she's like, no, all vampires are evil. They were gonna prey on me. It's you baited them into it. This is clearly entrapment. They could have been normal. And so she does have that that kind of horror realization at one point. That definitely does come up. I don't remember the statistic, okay? It was something with a 5 in it. Maybe it was just 5%. I don't think that's what it was. It was 5 out of something, the way it was phrased, but yeah. You like my lipstick? Thank you. It is MAC. I don't know what the name of the color is, but they only have very few dark purple lipsticks, so whatever the dark... It's the liquid lip color that comes with like screw off top and then it has a wand. The one that's not glossy. It's like the stay on. I think it's called Powder Kiss or something. Liquid lip color. And this purple was one of their Christmas colors that came in one of their Christmas sets. So I don't know if it's a standard color that they have year round, but they do have other colors that are similar. I'm very into MAC lipsticks now. Yes, it was a lot like I Am Legend. I was having that comparison in my head too, but her epiphany didn't really like shatter her the way it shatters the protagonist in I Am Legend. She just like kind of felt bad about it, and then she had a lot of other stuff going on. She didn't have time to, you know, have existential crises. This one dried, right? You like it, right? Evidence. She did embrace full-on serial killer vibes. Yeah, so at one point, Bones starts calling her the Red Reaper because she keeps killing everyone he needs to talk to before he can talk to them. He's like, you just killed 15 people. Why do you kill people so much? She's like, sorry, I'm like a throw knives, ask questions later kind of person. He's like, stop it. She doesn't kill anyone innocent when she's out with him. The only like person she kind of feels bad for killing is Stephanie, the college girl. Even though she was working for the bad vampire, she was just a human. But everyone else she kills, even the humans, are bad guys that she's killing. So it's very video gamey, like disposable NPCs, killing all the wherever. Scrolling up in the chat. If you have more questions, now's your chance to put them while I'm looking at the other questions you guys sent. Scrolling. Someone said they would watch it if they made it into a TV show. It was a very cinematically written book. There would be a lot of action in a TV show. Conserving my apple juice? You said that half an hour ago. I know, I was so busy talking, I didn't have enough time for drinking. Someone said also half an hour ago that you hope I can do more vampire reviews. So do I. I hope that too. The book has as much plot as Morganville vampires, but at least it's months and not 2 weeks. That's true. It is spread out over time. Because not only do they have the 5-week training montage, there's also a lot of downtime in there where they're just trying to follow clues and find out who works for Hennessy and where Hennessy is, and just weeks go by and she does like a whole college semester. Yeah, so the book starts 5 weeks before school starts ish. Maybe 6 weeks before school starts. And then she does her whole school semester, and then it ends like a couple weeks before Christmas. Someone said earlier that her mom sounds like a hypocrite. I'm not sure what you mean. Like, the mom is very prejudiced, and she's even prejudiced against her own daughter at times, telling her daughter that she's part evil, there's a monster in her, and she's constantly afraid that her daughter's gonna Hulk out and just go full evil vampire at any moment. And Kat still loves her anyway, but she's very hurt by this way her mom sees her. She's been raised by this her whole life to be seen as like a lesser person because she is half vampire. As even her mom sees her as a lesser person, and that's why she had no friends at school, because people would think she was weird because she had like weird strength. Like one of her backstories is there were boys bullying her when she was little and she kicked all their asses, and then, you know, they never messed with her again, but they thought she was a freak and she had no friends. Since this was written about 15-20 years ago, oh my god, really? It's been that long? How was 2007 15 years ago? What tropes, etc., do you see that are different to modern vampire books? I mean, the whole urban fantasy kick-ass vampire hunter who has to look sexy for reasons, I know it still exists out there, but it's definitely kind of faded in need to be popularity. A lot of the modern books that exist now are much more small, feeling like very focused on characters, more kind of relatable human people dealing with vampires. Like, I'm thinking about the book we read last month, All These Bodies, which was set in the past, but it was a modern story. It was very intimate, very small. Even like in the vampire story about her origin with the vampire who kidnapped her. What else is modern that we've read? Like Southern Book Club's Guide to Slaying Vampires, like again, a very small, intimate, normal person kind of thing. And the vampires are much more monstrous. The vampires in those books aren't like sexy bad boys with pale skin, and being a vampire makes them more beautiful and stuff. They are monstrous. They're kind of almost like cosmic horrors of vampires. Even though they can pass as normal people, they're just a lot more scary, not in personality but in physical appearance. Like, you know, bug mandibles will come out of their mouth, or they'll have like tentacles or whatever. It's just like a lot more monstrous physically. So fire doesn't hurt vampires somehow. I mean, I guess it's just that they're fast enough that they could run away from the fire. I don't know what would happen if you put a vampire on a bonfire. I think he might get like outwardly burned, like, you know, his skin would get all shriveled and stuff, but I guess it wouldn't go into him and like burn him all the way through, so he'd just be like a very charred looking mummy kind of person. When they're trying to get rid of the bodies of the two vampires they kill in the apartment complex, they burn down the apartment complex to like cover the tracks and also to show Hennessy that they were there. So fire destroys the remains. Back then, if you were to date a vampire, you would date darkness itself, and you could change them by being yourself. But see, she didn't have to change Bones. I don't know why my camera's moving like that. I'm sorry. Is it just because I'm going like this? She didn't have to change Bones. Bones was good all along. She had the wrong idea about Bones. She had the prejudice. Very like Pride and Prejudice, proto-romance, right? Or she just assumes something of him based on what he is and has to figure out who he is through that. And we find out that even though he was being mean to her and like kept threatening to kill her, he was in love with her, love at first sight, when he saw her kill the vampire that he was trying to get information from. And the only reason he made her the offer of being his sidekick and putting her through all that training and dressing her up sexy was because he wanted an excuse to like keep hanging out with her. He was in love with her from the start. Very much like complete head over heels smitten vampire. She's the only one for him. He may be a monster, but he's her monster, only her monster. And there's some comments later about how he's like a womanizer or something. And it doesn't say that specifically, but it's hinted at. But then there's another comment about how she's the only girl he's ever brought to visit this friend. She's the only girl he's ever seen done this with. Like, she's different than all the other girls. Yeah, they do mention that plane crashes are one of the few things that can kill vampires. And I don't know why a plane crash would kill, if it's just like, if it explodes and the vampire is blown to smithereens. Because if it just lands and crunches, if it breaks apart and the vampire falls out, like I feel like the vampire, if it fell out of the plane as the plane was going down and then it just dropped to earth, it wouldn't die, or into the water. I guess just certain plane crashes, the really pulverizing ones. We need a watch party for Hellsing Ultima Abridged. Do they allow that? Or would they put like a copyright strike on me if I tried? I don't know if that's allowed. We are so old. Bones sounds like a possessive psycho. Yes, he is, but because all vampires are possessive psychos. And that's just part of his vampire nature that he can't help. That's part of the monster that he is. Drinking blood, not aging, these things make him alien. Being possessive psycho, but the parts of him that are still human inside, the good parts, those are the parts to love. I know Hellsing Ultimate Abridged is fair use and parody, but would streaming it and watching it live be fair use? That's what I'm concerned about. Would I read this independently of book club? I mean, someone sent me these 3 books. One of you sent me these 3 books very sweetly, and, you know, they were gifts, and I would definitely want to, like, read the gifts someone sent me. It might have taken me a lot longer to get to it. I would have to probably be specifically in a urban fantasy mood, which is not my most common genre I'm in the mood for, but I just noticed that this book is listed as fiction. Book 2 is listed as paranormal romance, which is the genre that Twilight invented. And book 3 is listed as fiction again. So I don't know why they kept switching its genre like that. Interesting. Marketing is a thing. Do I think the Bones companion book that came out this year would be worth a read or redundant? I have no idea. Is it a retelling of the first book like Midnight Sun was, or is it just like a totally different book about Bones? And if you like him as a character, it'd probably be worth it. What's with vampires being abusers so rampant in modern vampire stories? I mean, the fact that they eat people is abuse in itself. Like, technically all vampires are rapists, right? Because there's always a power imbalance. Even if you have a relationship where a human is willing to give their blood to a vampire, it's because that vampire has some kind of power over them, some kind of allure to them that is an imbalance that a human cannot compete with. So by their very nature, they are predators and abusers. Which is why, like, the really good vampires are the ones who are like, no, I'm alone and I would never love a human. The human has to sort of, like, wear them down in vampire romance. But there's lots of monster fuckers out there who love a monster, who love an abuser, who loves someone that's, you know, power imbalances. Definitely a kink, and people love it, and that's fine for them. They like those kind of characters, either in fiction or in real life, or the characters in fiction like them in their own real life. Kat Sheridan, she was very against vampires, and she had to see that Bones was much less of an abuser than the other vampires. And he never abused her. Like, there's plenty of times where she's just like, what? You would just rape me, wouldn't you? He's like, no, I've never been with a woman who didn't want it. Like, I would never take advantage of a woman. When she's really drunk, she's like, let's do stuff. And he's like, no, you're drunk. We're not going to do anything. No. And he's not going to take advantage of her. And so he's a gentleman that way. And he shows his, like, goodness. I want a beast too. Well, I'll be Belle. A gentleman vampire. The best kind of vampire. For me, in my opinion. I love a gentleman vampire. I wish I could be a gentleman vampire. Maybe in my next life. He's a good guy. He won't take sexual advantage of you. The bar really is that low. Yay. All right, your last chance to share any more thoughts, feelings, or questions about this book, and then we will move on because it is already 10:23, and usually we're done with the whole book club by about 10 o'clock. Yeah, jealousy is shorthand for soulmate in these books. But it is framed as bad. Like, the jealousy is, they're ashamed of it. She doesn't like it when Bones does it. She wishes he would stop. And when she does it in herself, she's then ashamed later for doing it. It is a vampire trait that is to be ashamed of, kind of like how biting people is a vampire trait to be ashamed of for many vampires. So I thought having another negative trait for these vampires that they had to somehow cope with in existing was an interesting twist. Is there a post-apocalypse vampire book? Yes, many. We've talked about several. I Am Legend is the first post-apocalypse vampire book, the proto one. We haven't read any for book club. There's one that I really want to read, Chuck Wendig's book, Double Dead. The book I wrote is a post-apocalypse book about vampires. I tried not to read too many before I was writing my book because I didn't want to be influenced by other post-apocalyptic books about vampires. I wanted to make sure it was all my own original ideas. But now that my book's out and like the other 2 books are fully formatted and everything, I have been reading more, but I'm still kind of behind on that genre. Are there any other bad vampire traits Kat has besides the jealousy? She doesn't have the craving for blood. Like, there's one point where her mother's like, have you started drinking blood? And she's like, no, Ma, come on. Why would you think that about me? So since she can't have the bad vampire traits, she's a Danforth, she gets all of the strengths with none of the weaknesses. She does have that jealousy as that one weakness. So the fact that she even has one, I guess, is good compared to other half vampires out there. All right, what are we reading next time? So the book club wanted to read a book about Dracula's brides, and there are many books about Dracula's brides out there. I have 5, and I know there's another one that's really popular that just came out like 2 or 3 years ago, but I don't have that one yet, so I couldn't put it up for a vote. So I picked one from this series, this one and this one, and the one that won was Dowry of Blood, The New Hotness. This book has gotten a lot of buzz. Everyone is interested in it, and people who have read it are raving about it. I'll tell you about this in a minute, but I want to talk about the books that didn't win first. So this book, Sisters of the Night series. The Sisters of the Night are Dracula's 3 brides. This is called The Angry Angel, which is about one of the brides. And I know Chelsea Quinn Yarbrough had another book that was about a second bride, but then the third book about the third bride, her publisher folded or went under or something, and she lost the rights to it, or her publisher just refused to publish it, and she wasn't even able to self-publish it, at least for a while. I don't know if that's changed. She's been able to put it out herself, but it was a very upsetting thing for her that this third book in the Sisters of Night series about Dracula's 3 brides just could never see the light of day. So I've always wanted to read this because I know it was a big to-do, and Chelsea Quinn Yarbrough is one of those classic modern era, early modern era vampire fiction authors that everyone should read. This came out in 1998, written in 1997. One day we'll read that. And this series is the Daughters of Shadow and Blood series, and there's one book for each bride by J. Matthew Saunders, who is a local author in my community who I've met through author events, and I've seen him at conventions and stuff where he's been selling his books. And the thing that drew me to these books were the covers. I just think the covers are so beautiful. And he had some really beautiful swag that went with them, these gorgeous bookmarks. I was just like, these women are so beautiful. I want them, these vampires. So I read book 1 for my IRL book club, which is about the first bride. And then the book that I put up for book club for us to read was about the second bride. And because each book is about a different bride, you can read them standalone if you want. There is a framing device story that does have continuity between the 3, but that's not the important part. The important part is the bride's life story, and they are not in each other's life stories to begin with. It's about when they were human before they met Dracula, and then when they met Dracula and became vampires. But that is a very cool series. I did enjoy the first book, so since we're not reading it for book club this month, you should check that out. It's definitely on those lists. All the vampire books I own that you see behind me and everything I've ever shown on my channel, I've made lists of so that you can just go find them without having to go back and look at my videos, unless you want to. It's good for the algorithm. And you can find those lists in the description of this video of all the vampire books I own. Just scroll through it and see which ones catch your fancy. Dowry of Blood. So the story about this book is that it was an indie novel, self-published, small press published by the author S.T. Gibson, and it took off. It was a phenomenon. People loved it. It was kind of like a 50 Shades of Grey situation where a self-published thing blew up and then was bought by a publishing company and republished for real. Not that self-published books aren't real. They totally are. So this edition is supposedly revised and expanded, though people who've read it have said that they don't really notice anything different, so I'm not sure how much that is true. With a brand new pretty cover, put out by Red Hook Publishing. And now we can all read it. So when this was really popular and everyone was raving about it, it was the self-published version. And then they pulled that, so you couldn't get it anywhere while they were producing this version. And now this just came out right before Christmas. My father gave it to me as a Christmas gift. Thank you, Dad. And now I have it. And it won our vote about Dracula's Brides, the story of Dracula's Brides, by a landslide. It is about one particular bride, but the other brides are in it. Let me read you the summary. This is my last love letter to you, though some would call it a confession. So begins the tale of Constantina, the first bride... Constanta, first bride of Dracula. So begins a tale of obsession, desire, and control. So begins her revenge. Saved from the brink of death by a mysterious stranger, Constanta is transformed from a medieval peasant into a bride fit for an undying king. But when Dracula draws a cunning aristocrat and a starving artist into his web of passion and deceit, I guess those are the other two brides, an aristocrat and a starving artist, Constanta realizes that her beloved is capable of terrible things. Unless those are sexy guys that are drawn in, and I don't know. It could be men or women. It's very vague. Finding comfort in the arms of her rival consorts, no, I guess it must be the consorts, she begins to unravel their husband's dark secrets, with the lives of everyone she loves on the line. Constanta will have to choose between her own freedom and her love for her husband, but bonds forged by blood can be broken only by death. So it's the tale of Dracula's first bride. I don't know if there's stories about the other brides that are, if it's going to be a whole series like the other two books are doing, or if it's just a one-off. It's been around for a while, and I feel like if there was going to be more books in this as a series, we would have heard about them by now. So I think it is just a one-off, but I don't know for sure. I like that it says she finds comfort in the arms of her rival consorts. It makes me feel like they have a lesbian thing going on too, which is pretty cool. It's like a sister wives situation, but everyone's together. A nice polycule. So that's our next read. A lot of people assume this is a YA novel. It is not. It is an adult novel. It's pretty short, less than 300 pages. Hopefully it won't be Vampire War and Peace, as you called this one, with so much to recap. Read it and find out. It is brand new, so it's a little bit expensive and harder to get. You won't find it used anywhere probably, but a lot of libraries have it because it is the new hotness and it got a lot of buzz and a lot of press, so you can find it probably in your library. Get the ebook or buy it if you're so inclined. Support authors. It's always good to buy books from authors. Dowry of Blood. Oh, it's your first viewing of me live streaming? I'm so cool. Thank you. Welcome. Thank you for coming. And good night to everyone who's leaving. I suppose we should go soon. Have I been listening to the Mayfair Witches podcast? I have not. I've watched the entire Mayfair Witches show. I got sent the screeners earlier, so I just saw the season finale a couple days ago, which isn't out yet for everyone. And the fact that I wasn't inspired, I had to go listen to the podcast like I was with Interview with the Vampire, I think says something about the show. In some ways, I like Mayfair Witches, the show, better than Interview with the Vampire. I think it offends me less. But as a show, and the choices they chose for plot and for writing are things that I don't think were good choices. I don't care that it's changed so much from the book. I'm not as invested in the Mayfair Witches books or the Mayfair Witches characters beyond the world building. Like, the world building is what's important to me because they are shared universe with the Vampire Chronicles. I want that world building to tie in well. But, like, I don't care if they completely change Rowan's personality and character the same way I cared about Lewin Lestat. And she has completely changed. Totally different character. And a lot of other characters, too. The things that they did with some of the witch stuff, like with the weird rituals and stuff they do, I didn't like because it felt kind of cliche and stereotypical TV witches. And Anne Rice's books are very unstereotypical witches. The thing that makes them witches is that they can see ghosts. Any person with the power to see spirits and see ghosts is a witch in Anne Rice world, because then they can use that ghost to do their bidding. And so it's really the ghost that's making things happen. The witches don't have telekinesis. They can have the ghost lift things for them because they have the power over the spirit. Rowan does have the power to kill people with her mind and to, like, see how to heal people better with her mind. So she does have that power. But the other powers that the witches have, like, I have the power to predict the future. My special power is seducing men. Like, each of them have their one special power. That's not in the books at all. I think that's pretty cheesy. How do I feel about Midnight Mass? I haven't watched it yet. It's on my list. I wasn't really drawn to the concept of Midnight Mass because I'm not really into religious vampires much. Like, obviously they're a big part of vampires, religious vampires, but they're not my fave. So I'll watch it one of these days, but I haven't done it yet. Are ghosts even a plot point in the show at all? Well, Lasher, the main ghost, is a plot point. He is the plot point. So they keep that. He's a spirit, not a ghost. But, spoilers, turns out their spirits and ghosts aren't that different after all, that you find out in later books. In earlier books, you think they're like two completely separate entities, but no, there's a gray area. Oh my gosh, Shaming, your vampire jokes are so painful. Gonna go book club without mentioning the Queen. Yes, we always end Vampire Book Club by talking about Anne Rice in some way, shape, or form. Why? Because she's the reason I exist. Now. Not originally. She's not the reason I originally exist, but she's the reason I exist now. Midnight Mass is not about religious vampires? How could a show called Midnight Mass about a priest not be religious? I'm intrigued. I received the art book for Midnight Mass, which I don't really want to let myself look at too much in case it spoils the show for me, but I like the visuals. I will watch it one of these days. There's just other things that I want to focus on first. Yes, a critique of religion using vampires as a metaphor for religious extremism. Yes, religious-themed vampires. And vampires as metaphors for religion are not my personal taste. It doesn't do much for me. I know a lot of people who were raised Catholic or other extremist religions connect to those a lot, but that wasn't my story, personally. So, I'm not against them. I don't dislike them. I'm just saying I wasn't rushing to watch Midnight Mass because it wasn't anything super gripping for me. But I will. I always get a laugh at bad jokes, Sean. Inside. I'm laughing inside. I mentioned being a Wuthering Heights fan. Do I have any plans seeing the Emily Bronte movie that comes out next week? It's coming out next week! I saw a trailer for it and I really was interested. I didn't realize it was coming out. I don't keep up with films very much anymore. Ever since the pandemic started 3 years ago and I stopped going out of the house and seeing movies and stuff, I'm very out of touch with what's coming out. I liked all the direct to Netflix releases that we got because those were easy to watch, but I've only gone to a movie once out of the house since COVID started. I mean, I could totally go now. It's just I'm out of the habit, right? I'm very much a homebody. What do I think of the changes they made when it comes to the Talamasca in Mayfair Witches? What do you mean? I mean, the characters in the Talamasca are changed, but I don't know what changes you're talking about the Talamasca in general. Be more specific, please. You saw Glass Onions in theaters? I saw it on Netflix or whatever it's streaming on, and I loved it. It was an excellent movie. Highly recommend Glass Onion. It's like what Knives Out wanted to be and really thought it was being, what everyone was talking about it as if it was. But Glass Onion actually was that. Really love Glass Onion. Everyone should watch it. I'm a huge mystery fan of like the Agatha Christie style mysteries. I've read every single Agatha Christie book. It was like my crack in high school, was just sitting and reading an Agatha Christie book a day. And love that style of mystery. So Glass Onion really scratches that itch for me. So good. Knives Out was good too, but when I watched it, I was just like, why did this get so much raving hype? It's just like a classic murder mystery. Has nobody ever watched a mystery before? Have you never read an Agatha Christie book? But Glass Onion surprised me, enthralled me, made me laugh, made me cry. It was just like good as a movie. Like kept me on my toes. Like even the things that were predictable that I did predict, it just made me excited that I predicted them. And it was like good movie. Good characters, good writing, good plot, good story. What are some of my favorite Agatha Christie titles? Well, my like most underrated favorite is Death Comes at the End. No, I always get it confused. Death Comes at the End is the one they made the movie about. I was just talking about it yesterday. I'm gonna Google it. I Googled it yesterday to remember the title and then I forgot already. She has so many books, so many titles. No, it is Death Comes at the End. Okay, that is the one I meant. That is the one that is set in ancient Egypt, not to be confused with the one that is set in contemporary Egypt when she wrote it, so like 1960s Egypt, that they made a movie about. But Death Comes at the End is set in ancient Egypt, and it is about ancient Egyptians having a murder mystery in their ancient Egyptian home complex, like the way the home structure was set up. And I loved the details. I love the characters, that they felt very ancient as people, but still relatable and still like that classic Agatha Christie like coziness to it. That's my most underrated fave. I like the one, I'm gonna look up the title again. Peril at End House. That's the other one I like. I like that one. I've read that one twice. I like the character Nick in it. She's really cool. Peril at End House is a good one. And then, of course, Murder on the Orient Express, and Then There Were None, aka 10 Little Indians. Classics. If anyone wants to know where to get started with Agatha Christie, I always tell them to start with And Then There Were None. I like the Hercule Poirot books much better than the Miss Marple books. I went to see Renfield in theaters in April too. Yes. Oh, Murder on the Nile. Yeah, that's the one that takes place in modern Egypt. Though I don't think that was the original title. Death on the Nile. That was it. Death on the Nile. Not Murder on the Nile. Close. Yes. That one's okay. I like that one too. I didn't think the movie was very good though. The Renfield movie looks a lot like What We Do in the Shadows. It's definitely banking on that vibe and using that vibe to create something new, which I think is cool. A lot of people are like, it's a What We Do in the Shadows ripoff. But I'm like, yes, more. 2 cakes, please. I want it. It looks great. We can have Renfield and Guillermo. Yes, we can. Yes. Nick Cage is just weird in everything he does, so I'm sure he will make that movie amazing. You're remembering the book's wrong, but the Talamask in this show feels like they are too involved, if that makes sense. Well, have you read Taltos, the 3rd book in the Witches series? So in the 3rd book in the Witches series, we find out that there are 3 specific Talamasca members who are too involved against the Talamasca's ordinances, and they wind up being sort of like the bad guys of that book. So I'm wondering if the ones that are too involved that we're seeing in season 1 of Mayfair Witches are going to wind up being those guys. The names aren't the same, but they might be filling the same role. Because otherwise, you're right, the Talamasca wouldn't get involved. Even though Aaron did get involved the same way Cyprian gets involved in the show, but then he gets like excommunicated from the Talamasca for doing that, and then he marries a Mayfair and then, gets run over by a car. But that's what I'm thinking. The ones that are too involved, they're like conspiracy theorying for Lasher, are going to wind up being those ones from Taltos that aren't typical Talamascans at all. The Talamascans that are typical are still similar to the book, I think. Like, you're right about that, but I think it's going off of what happens later books when they sort of go against Talamasca rules, and they're just pushing it and making it early. I love used bookstores. I used to get so many used bookstores when I lived in Florida. There's a lot of used bookstores in Florida. Not so many around here, surprisingly. Oh, Vampire's Kiss with Nicolas Cage. So that's one of those movies where you don't know if the vampire's real or if he's just crazy, which is pretty good. Very psychological and interesting, and he's hilarious in it. It's Nick Cage slowly going crazy, which is what he does best, right? Oh my god. It's almost 11 o'clock. This has been a very long book club. Now's your last chance to ask me any questions about anything you like before we wrap up. Anything you've been holding back, now's your chance. Otherwise, read Dowry of Blood by March 13th. Our book club for this book will be on or around March 13th, not before, maybe later, like today's the 15th, so it's always similar to the 13th. If you want to talk about this book with the group before book club, join the Discord, click the book icon in the bot channel to join the book part of the Discord, and then talk to us there. You can do it with spoiler bars or just talk about spoilers if you want. Free to talk there. If you have ideas for what you want to read next time, put your ideas in the suggestions channel, the book club suggestions channel. It has to be a book I own or will own. The point of book club is to read the books I own. All these books behind me that I haven't read yet, the point of book club is to read these books. So if it's a book I don't already own, it's not eligible for book club unless someone makes me own it, which is always an option. If there's like a book you really want us to read that I don't own, and you're just like, here, Maven, take this book. Let's read it for a book club. Sure, yeah. People send me books to my P.O. box all the time. Thank you. People who send me books, I love you. A lot of people send me their old books they're getting rid of, or books they found used or something, or just a book they think that they want me to read because they really enjoyed it and they want to share it with me. So if you have a vampire book that you would like me to know, that's always an option. Or you can just suggest it and I will put it on my wish list, and my father might send it to me for Christmas like he did with this one, which is exactly how I got this. People suggested it over and over again, put it on my wish list, and then Christmas came and my family gave it to me. It always happens. You'd like to see a mashup with me and other booktubers? I would love to do that. None of them have asked me to do a mashup yet. They're all bigger than I am, so I feel like they would have to be the ones asking me. Otherwise, I wouldn't want to put them out. Dom Noble is a friend of mine. We hang out sometimes when we happen to be in the same state. We get along. I would love to do something with him if he has another thing. I helped him on his Anne Rice videos. I helped him on his Phantom of the Opera videos. Because, of course, I'm the go-to person for that. You see my name in the credits on his videos a few times. Yes, we work together. We've talked about other projects we want to do, but nothing in particular. Nothing's coming up. But if there's something particular you want to do, let me know. I could suggest it to him. He's always down for doing stuff. Or if there's anyone else you want me to reach out to. Trigger warning for domestic abuse in this book. Oh, yes. Okay. Thank you. Trigger warning for domestic abuse in this book. Considering it's Dracula's bride, I'm not surprised. If Dracula is abusing his wives, I'm not surprised. Or if it's someone else doing something similar, who knows? Not surprising. Princess Weeks, yes, another good friend of mine. She and I have discussed doing something together for a book club before. We haven't come up with a thing that we both want to do one month, but if we ever have an idea, or if there's ever a book that comes up that I think she'd be into doing with me, I'll reach out to her. We love doing videos together. So I'm sure she would come on here and then we could do the dual screen kind of almost said Skype. Zoom! Zoom screen. Yeah, if you have a suggestion for a title that you would want some of my friends specifically to read with me, that could probably help facilitate actually planning something getting out. Because I don't want to go to Dom or Princess and be like, hey, read this book for me for my book club, and they have zero interest in it. Or what if they love it and I hate it, right? That's going to be weird. So I want it to be something that we can have sort of a equal discussion about that's catered specifically to their interests. If you understand what I mean. Always open to suggestion, thank you. Do Wuthering Heights with Dom? That's not a vampire book. But if he ever does a Lost in adaptation about it, I would definitely help him with that because I'm obsessed with that book. I'm obsessed with a lot of things. You'll find this is true about me. Did you know I'm an obsessive person? Did you know I have hyperfixations? It's an ASD thing. Kathy and Heathcliff are emotional vampires. Yes, you could make that argument. I do have a book called Wuthering Bites, in which Heathcliff is a vampire, which of course he's the one they decide to make a vampire because he's the sexy bad boy. But if you actually pay attention to the book, Kathy is a much more obvious vampire in that book, with Heathcliff being the not vampire, and it's a missed opportunity that they wrote it with Heathcliff as the sexy vampire. Of all the vampire, Pride and Prejudice and Zombies ripoffs I have, Wuthering Bites is the only one we haven't read yet. We read My Favorite Fangs, Vampire Christmas Carol. I previously read Mr. Darcy Vampire and a few others, but Wuthering Bites just hasn't gotten chosen yet, even though I put it up. A Lost in adaptation of Wuthering Heights? Yeah, I would do that if he asked, if he wanted. I think he does Lost in adaptations at request of his patrons on Patreon. So if you have that foot in the door with him, that's something you could suggest, and suggest me if you like. Paul Faval's Vampire Trilogy. What about it? Oh, suggestions for next time. Yes, I got 2 of the books. I would want us to read the good one, I guess, which is Vampire City. I could put that up. I like putting up 3 books that are kind of similar in some way as a vote and letting the book club vote. But sometimes I'll just choose one book and be like, sorry guys, this is the one we're reading this time. I do want to read Vampire City at one point. The problem with Vampire City is that the only available English translation that exists is translated by this one guy who self-published it and sold it on Amazon, and he sets the price, so you have to buy it from him. It's not cheap. It's not a 99-cent book, and it's not something you're going to find in a library. So unless you can read the original French, which is public domain and you can get for free, getting that English translation might be a bit prohibitive to some of our book club members, which is something that I try to keep in mind. Like, it's not going to stop me completely. We have done expensive books before. It's not that expensive. It's like $16, but still, it's different than like a $3.99 ebook, right? See, there's a lot of Wuthering Heights films, so it depends which ones he's looking at. I love all of them. No, there's a couple that are dumb. Have you guys seen Heathcliff the musical? Probably not. It only existed in England, I think. But have you heard Heathcliff the musical? Because the soundtrack exists, and it's like one of those completely sung through musicals, like Les Miserables. So if you have the soundtrack, you have the entire musical. Almost. There are a few scenes obviously missing. It is so bad it's good. Heathcliff the musical is my crack. I love it. Like, I hated it the first time I listened to it, and the second time I was like, hey, I'm kind of digging this. And the third time I was like, okay, I'm hooked. I'm obsessed. It is like my garbage entirely. Love it. There's also Wuthering Heights musical, which was a major Broadway musical, which is, it's all right. But Heathcliff the musical was a passion project vehicle for Cliff Richards, the British pop star. I don't know if pop's the right word, easy listening star. And I know Cliff Richards because in the 80s, when Andrew Lloyd Webber was promoting Phantom of the Opera, he made some like really weird music videos to like air on MTV of some of his Phantom of the Opera songs. And the All I Ask of You version is Sarah Brightman singing with Cliff Richards, who was popular at the time, which was good like marketing for Andrew Lloyd Webber. And the music video of it is like a really bad karaoke video of them like running on the beach and holding hands and spinning around by the ocean. It's so cheesy. But that was my like first introduction to Cliff Richard. Yep. But he is Heathcliff in his passion project of Heathcliff the musical. And it's very much like a one man always on stage show with like everything else revolving around him. Lasher the musical. Okay. I keep talking. Hey, it's not 11 yet. Pop stars, right? Okay, thanks. I don't really know music genres of the modern music. The music I listen to is classical or 1930s jazz. Those are my 2 genres of music I listen to. So if it's not something of that, not hip with the kids. Bye, Emma. Thanks for stopping in. You got Poto Bingo. Like, you guys should make Vampire Book Club bingo. Like, is she going to talk about Phantom of the Opera? Is she going to talk about Anne Rice? Like, what's going to come up? Is she going to, finish her drink before the club's over, or finish the drink before the summary's over? That's probably a good one. This one took me a while. Frank Sinatra as a vampire in a movie called Stranger Than Night. I would watch that. I would buy that. Yes. You guys are great. I love hanging out with you. You should do it more often. Space for a David J. Skull mention. Oh, you're so good. You know me so well. Yes. He's awesome. I love that guy. I didn't mention him this time, though. Until now. Netflix 2020 Dracula, I did hate. But I know a lot of people liked it, and I don't want to, like, rain on your parade. But I did hate it. I like parts of it. There were parts of it that were really cool. But overall, generally, I was like, what the hell? The entire time I was watching it. And I watched it with Paul, who doesn't care that much about vampires the way I do, so is much more forgiving of things. And Paul also hated it. Like, he was very mad at it. Penny Dreadful. Yes, I watched all of Penny Dreadful. I didn't like Dracula in that either. He was a total weenie. It's like the weeniest Dracula I've ever seen. And of course the ending of Penny Dreadful is terrible because they had to rush the ending because they got canceled and it's not their fault, whatever. Oh, good night. Good night, good night. I should say good night too. Saying good night to people in the chat as they're leaving. You're all leaving, so I should leave too. Thank you for joining me. Join the Discord server. If you want to support Vampire Book Club, besides giving me super chats in the chat, which thank you guys so much, you can also join my Patreon. Even though I don't charge my patrons for these live streams, like the general patronage goes to support it, and it also goes to support the Discord server in general. It's all part of the perks. If I didn't have a Patreon, I wouldn't be able to do these streams or have the Discord and keep that up at all. So yes, thank you to my patrons. You can join that. Links in the description. Check out my lists of vampire books in the description. I have 3 lists because apparently a list can only have 400 items on it on Amazon. I did not know that. There's a limit on lists. I have more than 400 vampire books. So I have 3 lists. Just scroll through them, take your notes, decide which books look interesting. If there's any books that you see that you want to suggest for next Vampire Book Club, put it in the Discord. I know some of you suggested them here, but I'm not going to remember this. You have to put it in the Discord suggestions part in the server. And if I don't own it yet, I will add it to my wish list. My birthday is in May 1st. So any books that you think I should have, let me put on my wish list. And then I bet in my birthday, my brothers will send them to me. My brothers like sending me books, or my dad. Family is good for sending me books. Well, I hope you had a happy Valentine's Day yesterday. You did something vampire-y for Valentine's, something with like roses and red wine, as you should. And you have until March 13th to read Dowry of Blood. It's a short month, so you get a few days less, but I think it's a pretty easy read from what I've heard. And did you know it had deckled edges? I love deckled edges on a book. It's like book porn right there. Thank you for joining me. I will see you on Discord. Until next time.